4, 5, 6. Okay, we're good. Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the March 11th Oklahoma City Planning Commission meeting and ask that if you have pagers or cell phones or any other electronic device, if you would turn those off or silence them now, we would appreciate that. If you are here to discuss a case with us and you are not the applicant, sign-up sheets like these are available outside on a table outside the chambers. If you complete it and give it to our secretary, we'd be happy to hear you. And with that, we'll move to the approval of the February 25th minutes.
I'll move approval of February 25th minutes.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Cast your votes. And the minutes are approved. Continuance requests, J.J.
I have two uncontested continuance. Item 13, Spud 535, request deferral to April 22nd. And item 14, Spud 545, request deferral to April 22nd.
Is there anyone who came to talk to us about either items 13 or 14 on our agenda today?
Move the uncontested continuances.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the continuances. Cast your votes. Those are approved.
I have two new requests for continuances. Item 4, PUD 1412, the applicant requested deferral to March 25th. And item 9, Spud 547, applicant requested deferral to April 8th.
And the same question, is anyone here today who came to talk to us about cases 4 or 9 on our agenda? I said, is there anyone who came to talk to us about items 4 or 9 on our agenda? You're welcome.
Move to continue the items.
Second. Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the additional continuances. Cast your votes. That's approved. Are there any continuance requests from the public? Okay, items requiring a separate vote.
First item of public hearing is number 1, Spud 549, application by Frederick Knutson to rezone 8000 Southwest 89th Street from the AA Agricultural District to the Spud Simplified Planned Unit Development District.
Is the applicant here? If you would give us your name and address, please, for the record.
I'm Fred Knutson, 9101 South Council Road, Oklahoma City.
And would you please tell us what you'd like to do?
I'd like to get that 2.4 acres rezoned to allow me to put a inside and outside RV storage facility there, and also to be able to sell RVs if they're on the lot and somebody wants to sell them. It wouldn't be the main purpose.
Okay. We have a number of people who have signed up to discuss this case with us, so I will ask them if they will come up to this podium over here to my right, your left. And since there are a number of you who are signed up on this case, I would ask that you not repeat what someone else might have said previously. So if you have new information after hearing the other comments, we would very much like to hear you. The first person who signed up is Sylvia Wolf. And if you would give us your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Sylvia Wolf, and I live at 8915 Legacy Crossing Drive, Oklahoma City.
Thank you. And you've signed up to comment?
Yes. I'm here to represent our neighborhood out on 89th and Council, and I'm here to speak on behalf of my husband and myself. We just recently moved out to this addition, and we are directly across the street from this man where he lives wanting to put up this business of his. And my husband and I just recently moved out here. We wanted to move out away from the city to get away from the hustle and bustle of noise and traffic. And we moved out to the country because we like the peaceful, quiet setting. And and we found the perfect place out there where it was nice and quiet, and so we oppose of any kind of business being set up near our 1-acre lot, because we want a peaceful, quiet setting, somewhere where we feel like we can be safe and not have any traffic being built up around our area. We wanted to feel safe with not having a business-like setting put up around our house, and hoping that we could get away from noise and traffic and having a lot of construction around us and business. So we were hoping to get away from all that from the city, and only to find out that we're having to move out in the country where we could relax and have peaceful atmosphere, and then only to find out that we're having to fight something like this that's wanting to be constructed up in our area. So we do oppose we greatly oppose of the rezoning of this property, and would like for him to relocate it somewhere else if possible. And like I said, it's a beautiful area out in that area. It's a nice country setting. Family homes are out there for children to play in and around, and we greatly oppose of this.
Okay, thank you. Harrison Renault, if I pronounced your name correctly. If you'd also give us your name and address, please.
My name is Harrison Renault, and I reside at 7813 Southwest 89. If I repeat something she said, forgive me. I'm a little bit hard of hearing, and I can't hear back here.
Okay.
So anyway, we just recently moved here, and we love the area there. We moved in from a horse ranch out west. My wife made me move, and I assured her I would move and be happy if she didn't put somebody on both my shoulders. Anyway, this is a very nice area. Everybody out there, it's residential, has a half acre or better. Everybody likes the open spaces. We don't need commercial property in that area. There's no need for it. There's plenty of storage and stores and everything else in Oklahoma City if that's what somebody wants. If you drive out there, you're going to see that Southwest 89th and Council's in pretty poor shape. We don't need any more traffic than what we have right now. It's hard enough to keep those streets in shape the way it is. And with heavy equipment, whether it be boats or whatever, or more traffic, the roads are going to be worse. And again, I don't like traffic. That's why it was like pulling eye teeth to get me to come into the city to this meeting. But I don't want it bad enough to come.
Thank you.
I sure appreciate it if y'all wouldn't do that to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lori Jackson.
Hello, Lori Jackson. I live at 8900 Legacy Crossing Drive, and we moved here 3 months ago, searched Oklahoma City from one side to the other, chose this property because of the single-family agriculture area, and I am kind of repeating, but the fact of having a boat, storage, RV, trailer, sale and storage would be a tragedy for the area. If any of you have been in that area, there is a lot of traffic. The roads are hard to maintain out there, and the traffic would be bad, and just the overall encroachment of commercial property into a residential agriculture areas would just be a tragedy.
Thank you. Karen Reed.
Karen Reed. My address is 8448 Southwest 92nd Circle, which is about a fourth mile west of Council Road. And one of the reasons why I would oppose it is just what has been there before. I know this gentleman has put, I'm not sure where he gets his items or furniture or trash items, but he puts them up on the curbs, And I guess he puts them out there for big trash day. I'm really not sure, but it tends to have lots of what I would call kind of offensive. And so I'm thinking if he is going to put a business there, is it going to have that same type of trash and large items sitting on the corner? So that would be the reason why I'd want to oppose it.
Okay, thank you. Eve Armstrong. I'll have to find him. Did he sign up? Did you sign up, sir?
Yes, sir.
I apologize. I don't find a sign-up sheet for you.
Doug Hilbert, and I signed up, and she took the slip.
I believe you. If you
Okay.
Go ahead and give us your name and address, please.
Gentlemen, I live at 8801 South Council, and before all my neighbors appeared, I didn't know them a year ago because they weren't living there. They're all new homes. They've all moved there because of the area being AA. Now, looking at the ordinance that concerns what he's trying to change this to, I want the council to be aware that 89th is a dead-end street 3 miles to the east, and Council is dead-end to the south 3 miles. This is not the kind of thoroughfare, I believe, that the ordinance was directed to try to put a corner or something commercial on every corner. Now, Mr. Knutson, in the last year, Mr. McAtee and 17 others of us have been involved in a lawsuit because of the repeated actions of Mr. Knutson in regards to putting junk and everything else out on his corner. What Mr. Knutson does is he buys other people's trash and then resells it. If he can't resell it, he sets it out on the curb. And I bet if you check the file on him, you'd probably find 200 or 300 calls of people. It's not just people that live in the area. It's people that drive to and from Newcastle, to and from Tuttle, going to the FAA, because that's the easiest way for them to get to FAA. He finally took down his balloon image of a woman and his, quote, pickup trailer with Christmas tree lights on it upon the direction of a federal bankruptcy judge. He finally had the gall to tell him either do it or else. Mr. Knutson hadn't proven to be the best neighbor. I don't think if he gets into the business of buying other people's junk RVs, junk trailers, or anything else, that it's going to look any different out there. I think the area ought to stay zoned AA for that reason. I don't think the use of it being and that's going to look like a wrecker yard out there or a salvage yard. It's not going to be a neat and tidy thing where you see white painted with red trim, the doors locked. That's not the way Mr. Knutson has conducted himself in the past, and I don't think that's the way he will in the future. It's not going to be compatible with the neighborhood, and I'd request the council to consider it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Armstrong, you have something to add now? All right, thank you. Dustin and Sheila Helens. Give us your name and address, and we're looking for new information.
Yeah, new information would be Dustin Helens, 7800 Southwest, 87th Circle. I live just about a couple of hundred yards from this area in question. There's really no information. We're repeating ourselves, but the fact is it's a residential community, and we've all gone out there for that reason, is the residential, little spread out. That's the bottom line. And so we're asking that you consider it a residential and or still agricultural, because there is some of that still going on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is it Carl Hill?
Yes, I live just a quarter of a mile on Carl Hill, 9100 Wheatland Drive. We live just a quarter of a mile west from 89th Street in an addition. We moved out there because we liked the cows and the horses and that country atmosphere, but living in the residential area that we had. And we spent a lot of time developing and building fences and making a home. And we strongly oppose this being put in this position. Also to mention that the road going south on the council, there are 2 one-lane roads down there. I mean, you can't get across without one car passing the other. So I'd like to make mention of that. But we just strongly oppose this being put in the residential area.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Knudsen, response to any of the comments that you've heard?
Excuse me. I tried to rezone this about 5 years ago. When I bought the land, it's 2.47 acres on section lines. And before I bought it, I came to the Planning Commission, and I talked to Mr. Paulson, I believe. And I said, because on the plat, it says it's reserved for future commercial development. It's been like that for 8 years, perhaps, whenever they develop the area below that. And the Planning Commission assured me that 2 acres on section lines fits right in with the master plan, master plan for the city. But the neighbors objected then to rezoning for some of the same reasons. But it's 2 acres. I can't get a building permit on it unless I rezone it. And I'm paying higher taxes on that 2 acres because it is potentially commercial development. And there's been a sign on it for most of the last 5 years that said for sale, potential commercial. I'm sort of at a catch-22. The people that live in Legacy Crossings, there were 2 people that spoke, both of those houses are for sale, so I'm not sure the problem there. And everybody else, almost without exception, has known that that land was sitting there for future commercial development when they bought their areas and developed them. And the traffic shouldn't be a problem, especially I disagree with the idea that 89th and Council are dead end. They tee into MacArthur Boulevard, which is hugely busy, and 119th Street as well. Excuse me. I'm trying to get all my thoughts straight. There will not be a lot of traffic. There's only going to be one entrance into the property down on Council Road, and people don't pull their trailers and motorhomes in and out very often. Most people, on average, pull their motorhome out 3 times a year. So I don't think that would be encouraging traffic. It'll be a nicely lit, modern facility, no noise. It should be unobtrusive. And I've met with Council McAtee before. There really isn't anything I can do. I have to get this rezoned or just let it sit, and we're paying extra for that. And also, the Hillebrand, he misspoke, as he often does. Nobody ever told me, a bankruptcy judge has never told me anything. My land is as it is because I want it to be. The Armstrong lady who did not want to speak has filed bankruptcy twice in the last 10 years.
That's not relevant to
well, it is
your
because
request.
she spoke, sir.
She didn't speak.
She did. I heard her say that well, never mind. All right. Well, we'll let that one go.
Okay. Thank you.
But, you know, these people know that I have to do something with that property. And if we've asked for alternatives, I don't know what they want me to do with it. They've complained when I've had long grass on it. And I said, well, if I was zoned commercial, it wouldn't have long grass on it. There has never been anything on that 2 acres. It's just been sitting there. But I just don't know what to do. I'm sort of between really a rock and a hard place. It's my investment, my retirement investment. I have to do. I'm sorry. Very nervous. I have to do something with it.
Okay. Commissioners, discussion? Yes, ma'am. You need to come up to the microphone if you want to talk. I apologize then if... I apologize, it's not here, but go right ahead. Name and address.
My name is Cindy Cook. I am currently building a house at 8901 Legacy Crossing Drive. My husband and I own the subdivision. We've sold 2 homes in there. We also, just to the east, own a subdivision called Hallbrook with 29 residential lots. And as far as covering what everybody else did, I won't do that, but I can say that as far as being unobtrusive, when your child asks you as you drive by somebody's house why they have a big spray-painted piece of plywood saying, "Get your big girl panties on and deal with it," that kind of concerns me.
That's not relevant. It's different properties, sir.
Okay. Also, as far as amending it to be commercial, can you not try to amend it to be what also surrounds his property, such as residential tracts? That would be something that would be an answer as opposed to the commercial dealings that he does. I also have a question. What does the comprehensive plan for the neighborhood or the area call for this? Does it? And the other couple of things I have for him is, other than the streets dead ending, are just a mile north in Wheatland, there's a boat and RV storage. On I-44 and 134th, there's a boat and RV storage. So my concerns are that that's what he's asking to do, but that's not what's going to be on the property.
Well, in response to your question about the comprehensive plan, at least according to the staff report we have, that sort of a use would not be in conformance with the plan as currently written.
Okay. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Did I miss anyone else?
And I would like to respond to that. There has never been anything on that 2 acres. I also own the 5 acres below and beside that land, and this is what they're concerned about. And we have had the zoning.
So the plywood sign was on your property, but not this site. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
All right. Thank you. I just wanted that to be
I would
clear.
like to say that we've had the code enforcement officers out to our house at least 50 times by count, and we've never been issued a citation. And the reason that we've been involved in a legal tangle is I sued the city and all the neighbors to find out who it was that kept complaining and making bogus complaints, because we never got a citation. And when we went to court, one of the people had filed bankruptcy, so we could not find out, we could not depose them. And all of the rest of them were either covered by the shield of the city, or we would have had to depose each one of those, but it was the one we were concerned with.
Well, a lot of complaints come into the city to the center, what is it? Action Center.
Action Line, yes.
And Action Line, and those are on a regular basis anonymous calls, as you probably know.
Yes, I do.
All right, let's get to our discussion here on the horseshoe. Nick, you had something?
Mr. Chairman, I believe you made the point. It doesn't really matter what the history is and on other property and whatnot. We have this property before us today, and the request is for a heavy use, a C4 use, and as you pointed out, staff report indicates that that's not appropriate, not in compliance with the plan. Therefore, I can't support it.
James?
I'd like to just state that I'm in very much support of commercial development for that corner, but it would be a commercial development that would be a more compatible type of development, and that would provide a more compatible neighborhood services that would benefit the area. So I couldn't support this type of development on that property.
We do have a zoning classification for rural commercial that meets the needs of people who live in generally rural and agricultural sections of the city. And that's something that maybe you can examine, I don't know. Mm-hmm. The fact that, I would say to the rest of the people who've come down here, it is entirely possible that some commercial use would be suitable for that site, so you need to know that.
And I've invited them. I sent a letter to Mr. Hildebrand asking for alternatives, but he didn't respond. I'm open to suggestions. I just am in a bind.
Well, I just gave you one.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? Discussion?
Move to deny.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to deny item 1. Cast your votes. It is denied.
Item 2 is SPUD 550, which is an application by 1992 Brixton Square Limited Partnership to rezone property west of North Rockwell and north of Northwest Expressway from PUD 99A to SPUD 550 in Ward 1.
Mr. Chairman, Dennis Fox. I did not fill out a slip, but I do represent the applicant.
Give us your name and address.
522 Colcord Drive, Dennis Fox. It's a pleasure to be here, and on this application, we can agree with the technical evaluations that the staff has given you. This is the old theater that existed for a while at Brixton Square. It will now be used for school and school-related activities, and we're here to answer any questions if you have any.
Commissioners, any questions or comments? No one signed up.
I have just one. This isn't like a kennel operation. You're just going to have the dogs come during school hours?
That is correct.
I just wanted to be clear.
That is correct.
Exactly. So we don't have any issue about hours of operation. It's daytime while they're in school.
Yeah,
right?
That's correct. It will not, they will not be keeping dogs at night. This is during the day as part of the school activities.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
No, I'm fine. I'll move approval.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item 2. Cast your votes.
Thank you.
And Mr. Box, on this case, it's a pleasure to have you here. It's distinct from some of your other cases. But
Item 3 is PUD 1411, an application by Milestone Land Group to rezone 13,003 Northwest 3rd Street from PUD 1071 to PUD 1411 in Ward 3.
it's okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Kendall Dillon with Craft and Toll Sparks, representing the applicant. And I'll give you just a second to let those pass around. And just to kind of give you a brief overview of what it is we're attempting to do here, I gave you a handout which is pretty similar to what you see on the screen, but just to kind of give you an idea as to what this piece of property currently looks like. But this is a kind of a unique application. What we did in March of 2007, we filed a plat on this particular subdivision, which is called the Springs at Settlers Ridge, and it's currently a garden home addition. It's gated. It's got a masonry wall around it, and you can see the current lot layout. But for whatever reason, like I say, we did this in March of 2007, but it's been unsuccessful for some reason. And so currently what we have is the developer still maintains and controls the entire subdivision. There are 2 houses, if you'll notice on the drawing there, kind of in the southwest corner that have been constructed, but those, once again, are controlled by the developer and are vacant at this time. So what we'd like to do is we've got an opportunity at this point to look at developing an assisted living or senior independent living center that you will see. It's on the eastern 5 acres of the property that's hatched in blue in the map that I've given you there. So that opportunity is before us now, which is the purpose of this application. We feel like that if you look around the surrounding zoning, once again, to the west, we control that and want to incorporate that part of this overall development. To the south is vacant, but is a PUD that permits O2 zoning. To the north, there's an existing office, and then on the other side of Highway 92, back to the east, is a PUD that will abut. It's vacant at the moment, but it'll be office, and then to the north is some R1ZL property. So we feel like that this is not only a compatible and a consistent use for this property, but we feel like it'll be a nice amenity and will provide a service that's needed in this area. It's in close proximity, less than a mile and a half away from the hospital, and there's some other infrastructure out there that we think will kind of accommodate this development, and overall it'll be a good thing for the community and will be good for this overall development. So in regards to the TEs, we are in agreement with the number 2, 3, and 4 on TE number 1 in regards to that access that you see on the north end of this site. That we would like to modify the TE to read something to the effect that we would be permitted to have an emergency access there if required by the fire marshal's office. We do not intend, nor do we want another access, so if it is there, it'll have a crash gate across it so there won't be any access in the property, but we would like to leave that in there just for the case that the fire marshal desires to have that for this development. So that being said, we're in agreement with the other TEs and be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Commissioners, discussion, questions?
Do I understand that you're saying that the property that is directly west will be developed in conjunction with the assisted living?
Correct. It's like I say, the whole spring. So that portion and that tier, those row of lots that you see on the west side, are still within the perimeter fence and still will be incorporated to the overall development. They're not technically part of this rezoning application because we want to develop those still as the R1ZL. However, the overall intent is still to tie those, in essence, to the assisted living, to the senior independent living, so that they as well can participate in the recreational activities and those sort of amenities that we're going to offer on the other side. And then they'll share the joint common area, which is a pond. It has a walking trail. It's heavily landscaped, so that we want to basically just, in essence, redesign this development that's inside the gated community.
So you'll be providing people with sort of that tiered level of care as they're more independent. Perhaps they can live in the garden homes, and then as they need more care, move into the more institutional, I don't like that word,
Correct.
facility. Okay.
Yes, that's the intent.
I get that.
Any other discussion, Commissioners? Action?
Well, how do you want to modify TE1?
Just to require emergency access if the fire department requests it.
All right, with that revision on TE1, I move approval.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item 2. Is it 3 as conditioned? Cast your votes.
Thank you.
Item 4 is being continued until March the 25th. Item 5 is PUD 1413, an application by Abdul Bari to rezone 10701 Northwest 23rd Street from PUD 173 to PUD 1413 in Ward 1.
Good afternoon. My name is Barry Lodge. I'm with Red Rock Engineering. Address is 3817 Northwest Expressway in Oklahoma City, representing the applicant on the on the project. Also have in attendance with me today that may need to answer some of your questions the developers of the proposed project, Alan Klein, Monique Klein, his wife, and Dale Copeland. So they are here also if we need to have them answer some questions about the operation of the facility. Start off with maybe a couple of comments on the staff analysis and the comments, and then address the TEs. First thing, on sanitary sewer, we did get the staff comment that sewer extension would be required. Visited with the wastewater engineering department, and they said that we wouldn't have to extend it unless we wanted sewer service to the site, and since there's very little sewage use, that a septic system would be acceptable, which is what the developers would propose to have in there. Second item that I wanted to address is over under the variances. We had written into the PUD document when it was submitted that sidewalks along the arterial streets would not be required to be put in. We're going to withdraw that statement, and we'll agree to put in the sidewalks or pay the fee in lieu of sidewalk at the time of development. So with those two comments as far as the staff comments and analysis are concerned. In regard to the TEs, we've got 5 of them on the staff report. We agree with TEs number 3 and 4. We have no objection with those. We'd like to discuss, maybe modify TEs 1, 2, and 5, if possible. I'll start my way and work backwards if I can. That seems to probably be the easiest one. TE number 5, as the temporary construction sign should be limited to 1, not to exceed 200 square feet. According to the staff analysis that was in the staff report, the code would allow us to have 3 600 square foot signs. What we would like to request on this is 3 100 square foot signs that would be available during construction. They would be temporary, would be removed within 10 days after the construction is complete in accordance with the code. But we would like to modify TE number 5 to allow us to have the 3 100-square-foot temporary construction signs. TE number 2 is saying that Section 9.9 regarding the parking should be revised to provide a minimum of 10 parking spaces. And the staff analysis estimates that 60 parking spaces would be required for this development. It's a boat and RV storage with all of the facilities will be indoor with no outdoor storage allowed. The facility is not manned on a full-time basis, really even on a part-time basis. The facility is leased. Each of the bays will be leased on an appointment basis only. So people will call up the owners, developers, and schedule an appointment to come out, meet with them. When the owners are there, they have a garage bay that they park in, and so there's really no time when there's going to be more than just 1 or 2 cars that would be there to park at the facility. So we would like to be able to leave the PUD document as it currently reads with the 3 parking spaces, plus all of the indoor parking for the vehicles, that where everything is a parking space, essentially, each of the bays. It's not storage, it's actually just for vehicle parking. So we would like to have TE2 remain as the 3 parking spaces that are shown on the master development plan as it currently stands. And then when we get to the TE number 1, that discuss that a little bit. First thing talks about the gable roof, so we're okay with the gable roof. We have written into the PUD that a 1 to 12 roof pitch would be provided on the buildings on this facility. The current regulations are stating 5 to 12 or 6 to 12. The reason that we've looked at a 1 to 12 roof pitch is some of the buildings in this development will be 76 feet wide. We're looking at being able to put in some very large vehicles. And at say a 6 to 12 roof pitch, gabled in the middle, you've got an additional 19 feet of roof height above the top plate of the building. So we're looking at a top plate of the building at somewhere around 14 to 16 feet. You add another 19 feet onto that, we're up at a 35-foot gable height that we think is excessive. The 1 to 12 roof pitch keeps that down so that the roof line doesn't become obtrusive with the development. So that portion we would like to be able to leave as stated in the PUD at the roof pitch of 1 to 12. Rooftop mechanical systems, no problem with that. There will be none. Would like to discuss the exterior finish of the buildings. PUD, we described the ends of the buildings that face the Turnpike and Sarah Road as being metal with about a 4-foot wainscot, brick columns on the corners to dress those up a little bit. But having, of course, all of the interior walls of the buildings would be just the exposed painted metal, painted in accordance with the documents that were submitted with the PUD. That would be our first choice, to be able to stay with that. In discussions with Mr. Hensley on this, I think we're going to have to do some.
I was going to say, what was your second choice?
I can proceed through those. Second thing that we would like to present, second choice would be that we would have, we'd go ahead and brick the ends of the buildings that would be exposed to the Turnpike and to Sarah Road. They would be bricked up through the height of the building. We would still like to leave the building that will be on the far south as the back of it as the metal building. and I know that is still exposed to the street. The potential developers have gone out and they've moved some mature trees, and we're talking trees that right now are probably in the neighborhood of 20 to 25 feet tall. They've already transplanted some of those along that south boundary that would provide that landscaping. And in addition, starting just about where the entrance to this facility would be, the embankment goes up to the west for the bridge that goes over the turnpike. And so that just severely restricts the visibility of the backside of that building. We would, with the picture that's up there now, is showing the office. The sides of the office would be bricked instead of the brick wainscot and the columns on that. The office area would be bricked in its entirety. So that would be our second choice, is what we'd like to leave as modify the TE for the exterior finish in that manner.
Do you have a third choice, or is that it?
Well, I've actually got, I do have some more choices. Do you want to hear those too?
No. Let's hear from Mr.
Hensley. You want
Hensley.
to discuss them first, and then I can present?
Yeah, let's hear from Mr. Hensley.
Okay.
I've spent I've had at least 2, maybe 3 visits to the site. And I think it is important for us to that there is a geographical feature there that I think is important, as Barry's indicated, and that is along the south edge of the property, Sarah Road does rise dramatically to go back over the bridge of the turnpike. And so when we originally met on this thing, I said, look, we have a kind of a penchant for gable roofs with a nice 512 pitch to give these more of a residential look, et cetera. And one of the considerations that I had was, number one, was the size of the buildings that they're proposing, because they'll be double-sided in some circumstances, the big buildings for RV. And so when I was talking to Barry the other day about that, I had larger numbers than he expressed today, and that could lead to a 38-foot roof line in an area that has no roof line, which it seems to me that would be, that's not what we want in our garage, our personal storage units. I think that's a consideration that we need to have. And because of that variance when it goes up, on the south side there at Sarah Road, as that goes up, if you drag that roof line up with these big gables, you're actually making the area more apparent versus less apparent. They did have the benefit of a tree farm that was in the southwest corner of the property, and I drove it yesterday afternoon and went back out, and I would guess that they've moved probably 75 to 80 mature trees spaced. I don't know what the intervals are. You guys can tell me. 20?
Yeah, I think they're at about 20 feet.
20 feet.
And there was probably 200 to 300 of them, I think, that were actually moved. It was a lot of trees that
it's a heck of a lot of trees that completely ring fence. This is one of the most effective uses of existing trees that I've seen, that completely ring fence now, as we sit today, the property all along the Kilpatrick as well as along the commercial area there. And I cannot disagree at all that the trees are minimum right now 25 to 30 feet. They're very mature trees by summer, assuming they don't die, which I think that they have a significant chance of living and providing a very natural and effective screening of the property. So I think on the south side, the only consideration I have, look, I got it along the brick on the south side of the property. That bit of the property, given the grade of the road at Sarah Road, would be really hard to be visible. I think that the consideration that we've talked about the building ends along the Kilpatrick Turnpike, and then I don't know that they should have to. I think on the commercial side, I don't really care. There may be some argument to not bricking those if it's ultimately screened by the commercial, but I leave that to the rest of the commission. I think, and then getting to the roof pitch, once again, like I said, I think that is a real consideration. I looked at some other developments that these guys had done down in Norman. They've done a similar type facility, and they had pictures of that, and I was generally impressed favorably with the way it looked, the way it appeared, the way it seems to be running. The property is a challenging piece of property because of, as you can see, the way it lays within the turnpike. It's part of a PUD that was bisected by the turnpike some years back when it came through. Across on the west side is a bunch of ponds, et cetera. I don't know how it will ever, quite frankly, be developed. I don't see it being developed. And this, the way the turnpike cuts through there, I don't know that we're going to get a different use for this particular tract of land, or for this use, a better development. These guys have been pretty receptive to comments, et cetera, that we've had. So
I agree about the roof pitch. It doesn't make any sense at all to go with the guidelines that we have to go way up. But I also recognize that this is an appearance corridor function and some sort of architectural design rather than a flat roof and a metal building, which we're trying to get to. But I don't understand, Mike, about, the south side, you think that wouldn't be visible just because of the trees and the way the elevation is, the south portion. And so would that be metal? Would that be metal?
Well, I don't know. Quite frankly, I had not necessarily thought about the south side. I don't necessarily dispute Barry's characterization of that because of the grade of the road. It's just going to be an issue if we want that south side, if we want to be clear on that, because the road does go up, and you might have some visibility into it. It will be definitely screened by the trees.
Because the guidelines that we adopted are for the purpose of eliminating metal buildings with a flat roof and chain link fence all around. And I agree, you're not doing that here, but this is an appearance corridor, and this should be better than chain link fence, metal buildings, and a flat roof. So that my recommendation would be that in support of this, that whatever facade there is that's visible to any side that has traffic, fluff it up with brick, whatever that is, and I'd be agreeable to this. You can do interiors.
Yeah.
But this is the visibility to the public going through, and they hopefully would say, well, this Aspen thing, that's a nice little thing. That's really what I'm getting. That's really what we're getting. And the landscaping you're doing, the moving of trees, commendable, very commendable with that. I noticed that from your exhibits, and I'll bet you, well, no, if you describe these trees as being way mature, some of your renderings show a veritable forest surrounding this. And if you can,
well, they don't have leaves on them right now, so it doesn't look like a forest, but there's definitely very mature trees
when they
that are
get
out
up there. It really does. It looks like this is a good project, but there are just certain tweaks that I would support if you tweaked it where this visibility factor was eliminated.
Nick, you had a comment?
Just one along the same lines of what Bob was talking about. I, too, agree that the 112 pitch in this case probably makes sense, contrary to our policy. That said, if you have a 16-foot top plate and a 112 roof, what is the elevation of your roof going to be in relation to the driving elevation of the turnpike?
It will be, it's probably going to be, it's going to be probably a little lower than the tops of the trees that have been put in. The elevation of the turnpike on the driving lanes through there right now is approximately equal to the ground line of the site, of the western edge of the site. So the turnpike is, they're just about level where we start.
Well, where you start on the southwest corner, but then the turnpike kind of goes up.
The overpass does. It's the overpass that goes over the turnpike of 23rd Street does go up, and the grade of that the bridge where it crosses over is probably 25, 26 feet above the grade of the site, which would have it at, like I say, approximately the elevation at the top of the trees that were put in.
But what I'm trying to figure out is, you know, if you address Commissioner Bright's concern about bricking the visually exposed areas, then my question is, how much flat roof do I see as I'm flying around that curve on the turnpike? Because if you're going what they call eastbound, what I call north there,
right,
your line of sight is right through that curve, looking right at this spot. And I'm trying to visualize, and your exhibits are wonderful. I mean, the trees, and I'm assuming you're going to commit to this many trees.
Well, there's probably close to that many trees out there now that just don't have any leaves.
I'm trying to understand image-wise. I see the brick ends now, thanks to Commissioner Bright. I'm now trying to figure out how much roof I see.
From the turnpike itself, I don't think you'll see any. When the trees are leafed out, because the grade of the turnpike is at about the grade of the ground, with our 1 to 12 roof pitch on our biggest buildings, the height of the building at the peak will be in the neighborhood of 20 to 21 feet. And with the grade of the turnpike approximately equal with the ground line of our development, at least as it exists out there today, and we may even be lowering that some, the line of sight would be over the trees, which I don't think really during the spring, summer, and before the leaves are on that you'd really see any roof line from the turnpike itself. Now, you would from 23rd Street and from Sarah Road.
Oh, I understand that.
But not from the turnpike.
Thank you.
James?
Yes, I have a question. I concur with both Commissioner Bright and Gales concerning the ends of the building being materials that's in accordance with the standards. And on the roof portion, so I'm going to make an assumption, going to 1 and 12 will be a metal roof?
Yes.
Okay. One thing you might do is consider, have some study done as to the color. If you're going to use those roofs, to the color that wouldn't be, that maybe would, blend a little better.
If I'm not mistaken, the color scheme for this is kind of going to be I call it tan, with my limited decorating knowledge, with a green accent. So if I understand right, the actual metal roofs will be kind of a dark green color. So
that's what we talked about when we were out there, is the tan and green.
Yeah.
Right, Alan and Dale?
How many of the wide buildings do you have? Is there 4?
I think that's how many they've got in their plan right now.
The way I see it here, looks like maybe there's 4 buildings in there that's wide, and that's 76 feet.
Yes, sir.
And you're saying that 76 feet at a 612, you're 18 foot?
Well, you'd have 38 feet, and half of that would be 19.
Okay.
It'd be 19 feet above the top plate.
If you went to 3, then that would be half of that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And there's only, let's see, there's 4 wide buildings. Just doing some thinking here.
Sure.
Give us your name and address, please.
Alan Klein, 608 North Highway 76, Newcastle, Oklahoma.
Thank you.
There are 4 of the larger buildings of the 76-footers. We were talking earlier about color.
Yeah, back to
I think the information we put into you, we put a color scheme in there too, and it was like a Sahara green, or I think it's Sahara green.
May not have
I
printed
can show you
color.
the 2 colors. Do you?
Yeah, I don't think it printed in color. Oh, yeah.
Aspen Green and
The Adobe tan? There's a Sierra tan. Sahara tan. So the
That should help some.
Sahara tan is the building color, and the
and
Aspen green is the roof color.
That would be the trim color.
Trim color.
What about
the roof
the
color
roof
is
color?
what?
And the roof color?
And color?
White, silver.
Oh. Sir, we're going to need you at the microphone so we can get a record of what you have to say for us. A recording's made of the meeting, and you won't be heard by someone who might look at that later. Give us your name and address, please.
I'm Dale Copeland, 612 North Highway 76 in Newcastle.
Thank you.
The roof that we've used at Alpine, our facility in Norman, is a Galvalume. It's a white, silver. It's the most reflective, and it's used primarily to keep the temperatures as low as we can inside the structures.
Okay.
The trim is the Aspen green, and the building itself is a tan.
I think from the highway.
I just wanted to clarify the roof.
I think from the highway, that's going to be real noticeable. That's going to make it stand out more.
Which, the green or the?
Because the reflective roof is what James is talking about.
I'm talking about the Galvalume. That's really galvanized metal.
I don't know that you'll see that much of the roof line from as you drive it. You'll see it from Sarah when you go up at grade. At Turnpike elevation, it's flat. I mean, except for maybe in the southwest corner, the corner on the angle there, the angled corner. After you get past there, as I recall, and maybe Nick help me here, the turnpike kind of, if anything, goes down to grade, and when you get into the triangle up at the north end, it's pretty much at grade with the turnpike. Just if that's a consideration.
Mr. Chairman, may I say something? The guidelines that we adopted some time ago for storage buildings for the purpose of stopping metal buildings, flat roofs, and chain link fences. And in residential areas, we have brick or masonry or stucco facades, pitched roofs. That's why you're seeing all this. Where you're going to locate this particular storage facility on an appearance corridor on the Kirkpatrick Turnpike, which people that pay their tolls are going to go from way up there to way over there west, and they come through the city and they look to their right or their left, and they see this storage building with a bright, shiny metal roof with trees, but in the wintertime it's oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's what I'm getting. But in the wintertime, you see through the dead branches and you see this white metal roof. I'm sympathetic to the R factor of a dark roof. It's going to be warmer in the building in the summer with a dark roof than it does a reflective surface. But perhaps something can be done underneath the metal roof, such as double insulation or doing something under there to absorb the heat that's going to come in from a darker roof. But I think a darker roof does make the facility, along with the trees, spring, summer, and fall, less conspicuous, more attractive, and that's the purpose for the guidelines. We're trying to squeeze the guidelines into your facility, you know, the ends of the facades, masonry, and you can do this, the south side and the lesser pitched roof, but the end result, whatever it is, the end result, in my opinion, before I vote to approve this, the color scheme, the roof color, landscaping, visible sides to this facility need to be as nice as it can possibly be, because you've chosen the Kirkpatrick Turnpike to put it. If this is out there in the North 40, You'd still probably have to comply with the guidelines, but, you know, but it's squeezing in a thing, and we really, I would be hesitant to have a bright, shiny, silver white roof just reflecting. I don't think that doesn't make you, that makes you a lot more conspicuous than I would prefer.
Well, I'd put that, I mean, you guys have objection with the darker colored roof.
I mean, do you have a color that you would like to see?
I'm colorblind.
So he'd drive by and wouldn't know the
He wouldn't notice it there at all.
No white from dark.
I know.
Well, the green, you know, the proposed green that you're talking about, so it would blend more in through the trees.
Would that be I mean, this is something you guys can have to say.
Would, I think if we go to a color, I would like to, it doesn't make a lot of difference other than the R factor inside the stalls is what we are concerned with. I would suggest perhaps the light tan that we're using on the building itself, and then still continue to use the aspen green for the trim.
Well, you're making progress. It's better than silver white. I mean, you know, you're
yes, sir.
Just toning it, you know.
Yes, sir.
Just toning it down. So
I don't think that would be a problem, sir.
What color? Is it on the color chart?
Yeah.
There's a bunch of them.
That would still give some
this one
degree of reflection as far as the heat was concerned, rather than our dark color, which really absorbs the heat.
Well, there's a couple on here. There's the Adobe tan. There's Sahara tan you've talked about.
Sahara tan.
There's also a Colony green down there that's a little darker.
Yeah.
That's still lighter than your aspen green. We're not a design club here.
Yeah.
But we are overall appearance conscious. So, you know, something along those lines other than just the reflective
Yes, sir.
light.
Yes, sir.
That would be.
Well, more importantly, how do we feel about 3 parking spaces and 3 construction signs?
Well, I have a question on the 3 construction signs. Why, at this site, do you even need a construction sign, let alone 3?
More than anything, under the construction signs, when I went down and talked with Rob Rowe, he was telling me that on the construction signs, since we are the developer, we could put our sign up and just saying, you know, Aspen Boat and RV and a phone number. And because that would fall under that. And it's just a matter of getting our name out there, letting people know what's coming. And there's so much traffic on each of those roads that we would like to have it visible.
Is the facility going to be built all at once?
No,
No,
two
ma'am.
phases.
Phase 1 is just going to be the first 2 buildings right now.
So when we're talking about temporary construction signs, what would be the potential life of those things? I mean, over the next 5 years, you're going to be constructing this facility, and the signs could be there that long, or?
No, ma'am. Once we build Phase 1 and we already have our sign up, then there wouldn't be a need to have signs later. It's just kind of right now, since there's nothing out there, we want people to know that we're there and a phone number.
So you just need a sign for Phase 1? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
How long is Phase 1? I missed it. How long is Phase 1 going to take?
Phase 1 is the
60 to 90 days.
south 2 buildings and the office. We're probably talking
Probably
120
days
construction.
at the max, starting construction.
So they would be up there for in the neighborhood of 4 months.
then they'd have the
And
permanent
then
sign.
they would come down.
And then we'd have the permanent signs,
Yeah.
which we showed a picture of that.
So we'll just say 4 months.
Well, to completion of Phase 1.
Yeah, to the completion of Phase 1. That's going to be approximate, but
They would be taken down, like the ordinance says, 10 days after construction is completed, they would be taken down.
We have regulations about construction
Right.
signs. Why are we, I mean,
I'm not that fussed with them personally, but
I'm not either.
There is a
It's just-
concern. I say 10 days after completion of phase one.
Yeah.
Or that's the.
And you put them up when you get your permits, so, I mean, you know how long they'll be there.
Okay, how do you feel about parking?
I don't have an RV, so it's not going to matter to me. But
I have to say, I was amazed at the recommendation that the required parking for a personal storage was 60 spots. I never would have thought that. I just don't know. I'm not fussed, but
60 sounds like way too many. I'm not sure 3 sounds like enough. You know, obviously there might be an occasion upon which you have more than one person there at a time, but I don't feel qualified to choose a number out of a hat that what it ought to be, whether that number should be 5 or 10 or.
on full build-out, how many bays will you have? How many
bays?
Phase one?
No, full build-out, how many?
About 430.
I think you ought to have 10 parking spaces. I mean, you could easily have 10 people there at a time. I mean, I can see going out there to get my RV, and my buddy goes with me to help me get it all together, or my boat, and we have 2 vehicles, and one can go in the stall, and he leaves one in a parking space.
And you wouldn't have, if we provide the 10 parking spaces, would there be any objection to providing those inside the facility and not up next to the office?
As long as there are parking spaces provided for visitors in addition to the stalls. Sure.
Because the driveways are 65 feet wide, so there's plenty of room for parking in there, temporary.
That's my thought on the parking. People coming out there that are using the facility, they're not going to park in these parking spaces anyway. They're going to drive to their place, do their business, whatever it's going to be. If they're going to leave a vehicle there, they're not going to leave it exposed.
And the way it's worked in the past with Alpine, as Barry said, we don't have a manager on duty. We take phone calls, we go out and we meet the customer, and we schedule appointments accordingly. We don't want 2 or 3 people standing around at the same time trying to write a contract. So, we may schedule them an hour apart. So we would never be parked in the front space ourselves because we have our own unit to pull in. So, that's why we felt like the 2 plus a handicap would be a plenty. And they've been in business about 10 years.
Well, I think that the parking, John, your comment is appropriate, but since this is not free access, is that right? The guy that wants to go get his boat, he's got to call you first.
No, sir. What happens
Does he have a key?
We'll have a keypad, and then every unit is also alarmed. So when you come in, the way it works is you'll come in, you'll have your access code. You can get in.
Anytime I wanted to.
Anytime you wanted to.
Without calling you guys.
And what happens when you put your code in, the alarm for your unit goes off. And you go in, you get your unit. When you leave, you put your code in, your alarm kicks back on.
And isn't it customary for a car to be parked right outside where your unit is?
Correct. They would pull into their unit. They wouldn't park outside. They'd pull into their unit.
By the office building. Isn't that what you do? You just drive in there and do that. But I think that the comment about if this is fully built out, it might be that there is too few parking spaces if it's fully built. And I think that you said another parking area could be provided on the interior or some other place. Is that right?
Well, there are areas that won't necessarily be used for the driveways where through the different phases that we could stripe as parking spaces. They could be used temporarily. If necessary, we could stripe the center of the driveway. So we've got 65-foot wide rise, and we could stripe out a temporary parking area there. So that's an item that's not a huge issue.
My questions about the parking, or comments about the colors and the facades of the building, bricked, et cetera, all relate to your PUD application 9.19, that you're not going to present a specific plan in connection with this PUD as things are required. And we've got a lot of little funny items out there, parking, not maybe the construction signs are okay, facade treatment, colors of roofs, et cetera, that really we can't dictate that from here, but we know what we like when we see it. And what I'd like to say is that this denial of a specific plan probably ought to be, when you get this stuff together, you come back and show us where that additional parking is going to be, what's going to happen with the colors on the roof, and how the landscaping is going to be, and how things are going to be not disguised, but toned down from the viewpoint of the traffic on Kirkpatrick. And I'd like to have you come back in with a specific plan, because we've got a lot of little things out there. And, on the pitch of the roof, how that looks, and would we be agreeable to that?
Wait. Do we need to come back? You guys agree to 10 places?
We can do 10 spaces.
Yeah, we did 10 spaces. That doesn't have to be all on phase one.
Well, we know that.
From what
I don't think anybody's saying that.
But, yeah, we'll agree to 10 spaces.
I think we are getting to a point of overkill here. And
one quick question.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Go ahead.
Nick, go ahead. Are you committing to building this in conformity with the colored exhibits you've given us?
Committing to building with that color scheme?
Well, not the color scheme, but consistent with these color exhibits you've given us. This is what you're going to build.
Yes, sir.
Yes. That being said, I think that a good substitute for coming back with a plan.
And I have one question. The buildings that are facing the east side of the development, that would be facing Sarah Road, basically, what's the finish of those buildings going to be?
The end of the buildings that face Sarah Road would have the brick on them, just like the ends of the buildings on the turnpike. The two buildings that are shown in that master development plan that back up to the commercial corner, we'd propose to leave those just as the exposed metal on that, since it would be screened from view by a commercial development.
That's assuming that there is commercial development there. Yeah, and I have a concern with that, because I drive by one of these every day that has an empty potential commercial development area between it and the main road, and I see the metal on that storage facility. So that's a concern to me.
So then the recommendation, consideration would be just to brick all the ends that face the streets, commercial or otherwise.
Alan and Dale, that's y'all's decision. So it's
we can do that.
Okay. All right. Motion? Buck, did you have anything? Jimmy, did you have anything? Buck, did you have anything? Okay, so move approval of the application, subject to the amending TE number 2, or leaving TE number 2 as it is, at providing 10 parking spaces. Okay? The roof will remain at 112. Roof color to conform to the tan color that is selected for the building exterior, right? In other words, we're going to match the tan on the roof to the tan on the building.
Theoretically, if they want some contrast, they could go with one of those light green roofs. Just it's not that reflective white.
Not the reflective white, either the green or the tan. Right. Okay? Personally, Jennison, I think the tan would be the better thought, but we'll leave that. And then we are having sidewalks will be put on all the arterials or
fee in lieu.
Fee in lieu. And temporary construction sign will be one sign, phase one only, or is it 3 signs during phase one only?
Do 3.
3 signs.
3 signs.
3 signs during phase one
only.
only.
100 feet?
100 feet.
100 feet, as they propose.
Okay,
Jimmy,
we have a
anything
complete...
else?
Wait, the brick
He's got the brick on both ends. He's got
Brick facades on the ends that face, all the ends that...
Correct, all the
sides ends that face Kilpatrick, 23rd, and Sarah Road.
I'm going to second that motion with a request.
Okay.
That it stay at a 3 and 12 and not less.
That's a big concern.
The only comment I would make is
I understand the more pitch, the more you're going to see, but I think one of the reasons why we come up with this is to make this thing look a little bit more consistent, not like a flat roof out there. And I think we need to stay somewhat to that. And if I'm not going to vote against it if you say no. I'm seconding the motion, but I would sure like to see that as no less than 3 and 12.
I really kind of agree with Jim. I think it'd look better.
Well, it's as a request.
Yeah, right.
For consideration. It's not a part of the...
I think that the consensus is that be the motion, that it move to a 3-12. Having been to the site, I'll defer to my fellow commissioners with regard to that. I understand what the point Jimmy's making, though.
And I am inclined to follow his direction. That was the one concern. I didn't want to extend this discussion any further, but I get 6 to 12 is too much, or even 5 to 12. I'm not sure that the only other alternative is 1 to 12. I would like to see, a pitch that's a definite pitch. And if Commissioner Allen thinks that's 3 to 12, that's good enough for me.
What does that do to your building height, just out of curiosity?
It's what, 9
3
feet?
and 12 is going to get us about 24, 25 feet tall.
Now, and we would have to change part of that then, because we said that the building height wouldn't be over 22.
Right. We did specify 22-foot height in the PUD, so we'd have to modify that to go to a 25 or 26-foot total height.
With a 1.5 and 12 takes you close to about 21 feet.
22?
And 21 feet.
Yeah.
With a 1.5 and 12, and if you go 3.5, you go up to about 25 feet.
Right.
At the ridge. At the ridge.
Not rich, Mark. Because you're only...
Not be rich. He's 14 foot on the sidewalls.
It'd be half of what the 6 would be. Exactly.
Yeah, the 6 and 12 would give us 19 feet.
That'd be
so we'd
19
be going
feet.
up 8.5 feet.
That'd be 8.
Above
So it's
about a 16-foot
25
top
feet.
plate. So we're going to be at about 24, 25 feet
Yeah.
if we do the 3 and 12.
1.5, 25.
Okay, do we want to revisit your motion, Mike? You want to withdraw it and remake it?
Just split the difference and go 2 and 12 and
2
forget
12.
about it.
I think
Or just stick with the 22 feet.
I think 25 is going to stick those roof lines up. That was my only
But
concern.
I agree with Jim.
I'm happy for a 2. I'll go 2.
Would you go to 2?
We can go 2 and 12. And I say we may have
Do I
to,
hear 2.5? All right, let's
Sue.
Come on, let's sue.
That's my motion.
Wrap it up.
That's the motion.
2 and 12.
I second
22
it.
feet.
Okay.
I'll call for the question.
All right, are we clear on the motion now? 10 parking spaces, 3 construction signs, roof pitch 2 to 12. Cast your votes, and you're approved.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Item 6 is C-6192, which is the final plat of Montague Section 3, located south of Northwest 164th Street and east of North Rockwell in Ward 8.
Ross Morris, representing the applicant. This is the third phase of a multi-phase subdivision that we started 4 or 5 years ago. And we're coming in for another section to review the staff comments, and we concur with them all. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer it.
Okay, no one signed up, Commissioners.
Mr. Morris, and my drawing here, my stub out of 157th Street doesn't quite line up. I assume it really is going to.
Yeah, there is we're 157th, we're going to have to, there's a 5-foot offset between where we tie into Sonia Door and ours, so we're going to revise the plat to accommodate that.
Anything else, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, this is in conformance with the preliminary plat. I'd move approval.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item 6. Cast your votes. That's approved.
Thank you.
Item 7 is SPUD 548. It's an application by Commercial Permits Express to rezone 540 Southeast 82nd Street from R1 Single Family to SPUD 548 in Ward 4.
Dean?
Did you bring a color chart with you, Dean? This is a metal building, isn't it? Did you bring a color chart?
No, sir, I did not. I apologize. I didn't know I needed one, but I'll do about that in the future. Dean Dyes of Commercial Permits Express, representing the applicant. This is a predominantly industrial area where this property is located. And when I did the application, or I guess I should say I'd like to amend the staff application where it's talking about the development used to being 70% something other than metal. Originally, we submitted the application showing an all-metal structure. It's a warehouse that's going to be used by an existing business that's already in that area, which has a metal structure. And only about 4 years ago, there was a metal structure, all metal, built right next door to the west. And then next door to the east, there's about, well, all of what you see there, the office warehouse to the east. Those are all metal structures. So that was the only change that, or amendment that I'd like to make to the staff application. As far as the TEs go, we're okay with that.
So we'll get the rest of 82nd Street there.
Yes, sir. You'll get the rest of it. Now, I would like to make sure that we're both on the same page on 82nd Street because it doesn't reflect it on the drawing up here. But as I understand it, we're taking the south half of that divided street and just bringing it over to the existing 82nd Street that goes all the way to Linda Lane.
And that's the drawing that you got from the staff?
Yes, sir.
You might want to pass that around.
Pass that around. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page together.
Okay.
And there's also a 30-foot easement, too, almost.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're doing, but the visual will help. Won't help? Oh, well, in that case.
It's not much of a drawing, but it at least gets the point across, I guess.
Now, rather than taking the easement all the way across there.
See, on the TE number 4 on the back of the report there, it says just to extend it from, and it doesn't say, it doesn't really give a description. So.
Well, let's see. What do we really mean by TE4, JJ?
Southeast 82nd Street is a substandard 2-lane asphalt road in the front of this gentleman's property. What we want to do is upgrade the south half of that street to industrial standards, which is 16 feet from center, curb and gutter. But you have an odd situation at the east end where 82nd from there east is a boulevard, median divided. So at the east end, we want him to just tie in to that south lane of 82nd. Currently, you go down and then you have to jog over that median there at Gateway Terrace.
So Dean's drawing is what you have in mind?
Dean's drawing is what we have in mind.
Okay. No one signed up, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to eliminate item number, under other development and regulations, item number 1. And then amend the staff TEs on item 4 to the drawing that was shown to us on the horseshoe. Make a motion to approve.
Second. Let me make a comment before the vote, and it's the same argument that we've heard in years past about why I need a 50-foot pole sign because all my neighbors have a 50-foot pole sign. And I don't. Well, no. I'm now going to the metal building aspect of our policy. We adopted the policy for a reason. It makes the city better. And just because there weren't policies in the past restricting the plethora of metal buildings throughout the city doesn't make it right to vote for another one. You've got to stop someplace. That's really my point. Not that I don't know, but that's my point, is that you got to stop someplace, and maybe when you come in with a PUD and said, I want to do a metal building, well then, as Jim said, what's the color? What does it look like? But I think that there could be a better construction technique for just a small amount of money more, not brick, but some other stucco stuff, that you could make it a better place.
The existing buildings that these same people have there now is a light gray sidewall with a dark gray trim on the gutters and the rake trim all the way around, and the roof is also gray. I'm assuming it's going to be something very similar. It will not be just a silver metal building. It'll be a colored metal.
It's just really an editorial comment. I don't really have, I agree that if you're surrounded, but I would like to just have, when this come up again, for us to consider maybe stopping the process and the proliferation of metal building. That's my comment.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve item 7. Cast your votes. It's approved.
Thank you.
Item 8 is PUD 1393, which is an application by Sooner Traditions to rezone 641 Northwest 164th Street from PUD 235A to PUD 1393 in Ward 8.
Ready?
Brian?
You usually call break right before I get started, so I should have started talking already. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Brian Kuhn with Kuhn Engineering, representing the applicant. A long time coming before you, but I think we're going to hear the story today. I think we've answered as many questions as we can at this point. And so, I think there are two issues that I want to address today, or two different arenas. This property was zoned for apartments back in 1986. This is Tract B of that original PUD, like I said, from 1986. It was Tract A, which was that PUD that shows as the office park over there to the southwest. But this is 21 acres that was zoned, like I said, long ago. Now, the first issue, and the reason it's taken so long to get back before you, is we've had some flood zone discussions. This is surrounded by flood zone. It's in the Chisholm Creek Basin, so there's lots of issues there. We have originally, well over a year ago, did a flood study enough to satisfy ourselves that we could go forward. The client wanted to buy the property to start doing layouts. Since that time, and from that study, it goes to the city for their approval,
and then it goes on to FEMA after they approve it. That's the normal process. You do what they call a clomer. If you want to do anything that's different than what the existing flood map shows with FEMA, you have to get a clomer. They approve the clomer. Once they approve the clomer, you can do your work. You prove that you did what you said you were going to do, and they issue a lomer. So it's originally it's a conditional letter map revision, then it's a letter map revision. So we took it far enough so that we could be satisfied to tell our client, yes, we think you have about 9 acres. He hires his architect, he does his layout. So that's what we had done. You all asked if we would go to the next step, which we have now done. And in that period of time, there is now new Oklahoma City flood maps. So we had to revise the study to go along with the new numbers that FEMA has come up with that the city is adopting. I've got several exhibits here that show, I'll try to talk loud, I usually do anyway. So this map shows what we call the effective line. This yellow line is where the existing flood map shows the flood zones. Okay? And as you can see, it falls right into here, it goes up into here, and on down. Those flood maps are generally pretty close. But a lot of times, they're off in certain areas because these were done with aerial photos, aerial topos, so they don't know exactly what's going on under the trees. We had one in the edge, the creek was actually completely outside of the flood zone. So when you do a flood zone, you can modify it if you want to. The existing 100-year flood line, we only showed it on the inside, but these others will show it later. The existing flood line with the flood map actually comes into 2 lots here, and it cuts off the corner of this. During the flood study, when we turn it in, we will prove that those lots, these 2 of them, are no flood zone for the map. So that's the reason we go through that process. This also shows what we call the effective lines here. The proposed is the red, which means that's where we say the flood line will be based on the new map and what we're going to do. And then we also show these green lines being that's what they call a floodway. Now, if you notice the black line, which is the limits of where we will develop, from here over to here is where the houses are. This is all trees and all green. Okay? So we're not getting into that area of our construction of parking lots or buildings. Okay?
What's the separation, Brian, there?
Actually, and I'll show you later, but I can tell you right now that none of our buildings are within 185 feet of any property, of any residential property. Okay?
Okay.
This just depicts where those buildings are. All I've done is I've just highlighted the outside of the buildings or the parking lots. Okay? And it's right here. Again, this is the back line of the houses. These lots are probably 120 foot deep. So that shows you the scale of how wide that creek area is. Okay? And I don't know if the deer is here or if this is. And he's going to talk about what our study has shown. We made some comments. We revised and made some additional processes to show what's going on. In FEMA, he will explain this too, but I want to make sure I make my point. We cannot change a flood map if it adversely affects someone else's property without their written approval. Okay? So in some of our cases, and it's shown, these are flood studies. Any engineer here can probably tell you they're very detailed studies. They're hard to read. A lot of lines, effective, proposed, or just floodways, 50 urbanized, 100 urbanized. This again shows the effective, which is what is out there now. The yellow is what is the proposed FEMA, proposed 50 urban. In FEMA's rules, you have to go with one set of numbers. Oklahoma City goes above that, and they say, we want to see what a 50 years for in an urbanized condition. Urbanized means everything upstream is developed. Okay, so that started back in Paul Monday. We have to design for a fully developed condition. Okay, and this is where I was showing you that the current map shows that this flood zone cuts up into these 2 lots. With these 2 owners, and I don't need to see it, I don't want to alarm anybody, but if they were to get a new loan right now, they're limited because they need flood insurance. This new study will get them out of that requirement because the map will be revised. So, we're studying both sides of the creek, and we are not changing the flow line of the creek in any way. Okay? Now, we had originally thought that we had about 9.7 acres, 9.8. Right now, we have 9 acres. Okay? And I think what I've always been trying to say in this case is whether I have 5 acres, or whether I have 9, or whether I have 30. That's one issue. But then we'll get into the second problem with this deal is, okay, whichever area we have, which we have to prove to these 2 guys back here, we have to prove to FEMA. I'm not just going to do it in the middle of the night. I've got to follow rules. Is understand you like what's in the original PUD, and you like what's in the new PUD. That's why I think this is one issue. I think the other issue is the uses for the unit. I have some exhibits that I would like to pass out to you. I don't know how many meetings ago, Mr. Gale said, okay, existing PUD, what do we do with the existing PUD? And did you do that? We have not at that time. We've got half of these, and on the front of this is a comparison chart. My comparison chart, he doesn't like it, but that's okay. I'm sure. Is the drawing, there's two drawings there. I believe the first drawing is what will happen with the first, with our new PUD, and we are saying we have 240 units. Okay? The second drawing is what could happen with the existing PUD. The existing PUD along the frontage on 164th Street will only allow fourplexes. Behind about a line that's about 200 foot off the section line road, we can go to eightplexes. Okay? So that's the comparison of those two drawings and what the existing PUD does. I also have a drawing, and I've told you we have 8. It's actually, I said 9 acres. We have 8.9998 acres. So it's a thousandth short. This also, and I think you're going to hear about apartments not being appropriate use in this area. I'll just pass these out and just look around. If you know apartments are in the city, apartments are almost always on section line roads, and they always shut in. They got to come into the neighborhood some. Usually they're surrounded by either commercial area, they've got houses around them. That's 6 or 7 of just the pictures we took that show apartment areas that are surrounded by houses, at least on 3 sides. The other side is section line. So I think and it was appropriate use back in 1986 when it was zoned, and there was houses there then. One of the things that I think is a point of contention with Mr. Groves and some of the neighbors is how the density was calculated. The density is calculated, and this is why we can do cluster homes in areas. If you have 100 acres that you own, you do your density based on that. Staff has agreed, and even in the staff report, it just says that we recommend approval or conditional approval if the Plan Commission determines that the proposed decrease in density. So I'm saying the way I've figured density for a long time, and the way the staff still does density calculations, is they're saying this is a decrease in density. It's what I propose. So I just wanted to say that I'm not the only one saying it. It's also staff, and it's the way we've done it for a long time. I'll talk about the staff report a little bit. Items 2 and 3, the original PUD or the existing PUD said they had a 20-foot buffer zone along the perimeter of the property that they wouldn't touch. We've agreed to go to a 50-foot and have done that. The master development plan, they've said they wanted parcel dimensions. We've made those changes a long time ago. I think one of the things that's interesting, and it was brought up in an earlier case today, is here's an application for a PUD, not here, but previous, you had an application for a PUD that you weren't going to see again. This case, you're going to see a final plat. And so you will see what the buildings look like when we get to our final plat stage and plans. The existing PUD does not have to come before you ever again with anything. We wouldn't be here today if someone wanted to develop it with existing PUD. Originally, there was, like I said, back to the TEs, originally there were 17 TEs, now there's 4, of which we've agreed to 2 of them, 2 of the TEs. The first one talks about percentage of brick. We have in our PUD document that we'll do 50% brick. Right now there is 0% brick. It's any material you want to use. I think even Mr. Ellers can talk to this issue. We've got an apartment complex that was built in the last 2 years that's 100% hardy plank. This could be 100% hardy plank. It could be 100% wood siding. There are no guidelines in the existing PUD, and that's why I felt like this new PUD started to give some teeth to what you guys have been trying to accomplish. Guys and ladies, excuse me. We've said 50 in the PUD. Staff has asked for 70. We would be more than happy to go to 60% brick or masonry materials. So that not including hardy plank. Hardy plank can only be a maximum of 40%. So I'm saying brick, 60% brick. The other issue, or the other TE, which is number 2, talks about the heights of the building. The existing PUD will allow 2-story up to 35 feet. One of the things that you'll hear, and it's one of the comparison charts that you see in here, is it says we have no maximum height limit. We do. It's 3 stories and 45 feet. It's in our documents. Our 3-story buildings are limited to the western half of the property, which is over here. See, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. These 5 buildings over here. So the western half of the property is a 3-story. Now, if you look at that old PUD drawing showing the smaller units, I think it said 264 units. I can do 264, 4-plexes and 8-plexes, 2-story. So what I'm saying, and this was the very first time I came before you, is if we go 3-story on some of the buildings, it creates more green space. That's why you're seeing it in almost every new apartment complex today, there's 3-story. I have some pictures here also that I'd like to pass out. As you look through these, there's an apartment complex called Legacy Apartments up at Eastern Memorial. Okay? It's surrounded, on the north side of it is single-family houses. This apartment complex was built by the same developer that did the homes. So he had to sell homes next to the apartments that he sold and that he's developed. Okay? Those apartments are about 80 feet from that back property line of those homes. And you'll see some very nice homes that back up these 3-story apartments, like I said, 80 feet away. I'm telling you that on that west side, the minimum I have is 185 feet from a back property line to a 3-story building. Over on the eastern part of the property, where there are 2-story buildings, some of them I've got 224 feet, I've got 328 feet, 287 feet from the back property line to an edge of a building. So I think the buffer zone is pretty adequate. Your rule right now in Oklahoma City, your guideline I think it is if you have 2-story apartments that back up to homes, you don't want any 2-story windows facing those homes if it's within 50 feet. Again, I just got to make the point, I'm over 185 feet. And because of the trees, because of the distance, I don't think you'll notice, and you'll notice on those pictures on some of them, that there's 2-story and 3-story buildings mixed, and you really can't tell much difference in them because of the elevation changes in the property, and that will be the same thing here. Okay? Again, we will come back, when we come back to you, we will be back before you with the final plat, which will show exactly all these things I'm telling you. At that time, we can have colors of our bricks. We will have all that with us. On my chart that I do have, that I did prepare for you, I think there's just some key points. Like I said, the platting. We will have Class C roofing, which is not in the existing PUD. I'm sure there's fire codes that will require that now. The screening of the dumpsters is not in it currently now. Right now, the current zoning will allow there's no signage requirements. I wish Mr. Bright was still here, because what we're doing is only monument signs. So I think he likes that part. There are guidelines for the landscaping along 164th that we have. There are no guidelines at all in the existing PUD. So, again, I think 2 issues. One is how much land do we have. I think we've proven that. And I do know that I will not be able to go any further forward with construction until Stormwater Department signs off, and as well as FEMA has to sign off. So I think he's here. He can address those questions. Let me just see. I don't want to... one of the issues that come, and I appreciate Mr. Groves, he did a very good summary of what his felt like the issues were. It was talking about that this parking area will abut the existing neighborhoods, but as you've seen in my drawings, we're on the other side of the creek. So we're not abutting the property owners, okay? Depends on what you say is by abut. And then it says also, sadly, most of the existing trees will be destroyed. We're not going to do anything we're not moving the creek. So any trees that are up above the banks will be left alone. One of the things you will hear, and I like to throw these things out before you hear them new, is, and Mr. Adair, or Mr. Agrawal will tell you, if there's any water that exceeds 5 feet per second, the velocity of the water, you have to armor that bank with riprap or some form. Our water is not going to create any additional properties on the existing creek. Our water, if it creates a problem, would be further north. This is water that's already coming to this site. When we develop, we have to armor some of the creek with riprap. So there may be a tree taken out of the bank, but not above the bank. We don't have to put riprap up on the flat part above. So those trees will remain alone. And like I put, we have 50 foot that we will completely leave alone. But he will require in some areas, and that will be figured out, and that will be calculated in the further studies, we will have to put some riprap in the creek. I've told you I was going to leave the creek alone, but I will have to satisfy him that that will be a protection for the existing homes. So, questions?
On this drawing,
Yes, ma'am.
some of these buildings are darker than others?
Those are the three-story over on the west side. Now, one other thing on that drawing.
The other buildings, though, just to go ahead.
Pardon? Yes.
Just one thing. So these other lighter colored are actual buildings that are also proposed.
Oh, yeah, they're two-story.
They're two-story.
You bet. I've got the two-story on the east side where all the neighbors are.
Right, okay.
I've got the
Just wanted to be
three-stories
clear
on the
what
west
you're
side.
drawing.
Yes,
so
sir.
The darker, the hash-marked ones then are your 3 stories
Yes.
over to the west.
Yes. So I move them as far away from the houses as I can. Like I said, based on the existing zoning, I can do the two-story, I believe, on the whole thing, but we're going to take up more green space. One other issue on that also, and you made me lose my concentration. Oh, I'm sorry. On that site plan that's in our master development plan, it shows a detention pond. On this property, detention is not required by the city. I showed that to show good faith of this developer that he wants to protect downstream properties, okay? Now, I was told in a meeting earlier this week, not sure which day it is, that the city will probably not allow me to build a detention pond. Detention ponds are not always good, okay? So if the 3-story goes away, I all of a sudden gain that property for developable land. I just want to make sure you all understand when I come back in 6 months, hopefully, you see a final plat, detention pond's not there, you say, wait a minute, we saw that before. They may not allow me to do that. So that's the reason there's a detention pond. Any other questions for me at this point?
Brian, I just have one comment before
Okay.
we hear from Eric, and that is, I mean, it's well to talk about PUD 235A, but if that was viable economically, if it was attractive to this developer or anybody else who's looked at this property in the last 20 years, it would be done. I think we can probably dispense with that discussion, just kind of focus on what it is you're proposing to do here, because I don't think anybody's going to take this property and build it out under 235A.
Can I say one thing to that?
Right ahead.
Okay. The developer, he was the one that was reluctant to pay any more money to do a flood study. He's paid a lot of money to get this point. The owner of the property agreed to do this to finish the flood study. And the reason they did that is because we have never known how much land we had to build on. At this point, they will. And I think you've got a person 2 doors down from you that can testify that they can build apartments without architectural guidelines, and they are being done today.
Oh, yes.
So
I'm saying based on this piece of property, what it cost, and so forth, that it's probably not viable.
I can get I don't know. I'm not going to argue that point. I'm just saying I can do 260 units under the existing PUD with no architectural guidelines. I'm not going to. I don't build apartments. But there's a lot more answers for the property now than there were before. So now the seller can market it at 9 acres.
Okay. Let's hear from Mr. Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, my name is Eric Groves. I'm an attorney. I represent the protestants in this case. The Commission will recall, with the exception of our new commissioner, that you denied this PUD last year, I think by a vote of 5-3. Not a very great deal has changed since last time this came before the Commission. Councilman Ryan, I believe, inspired a second round of hearing this PUD because he wanted the applicant to submit additional flood data. So that's why it is coming before you a second time. But you denied it the last time it was here. Some flood data has been submitted. I've seen the study. Our engineer has taken a look at it. And there have been some comments by Public Works, but many issues remain unresolved despite that study. And I would remind the Commission that these studies are theoretical only. They're based on computer models, and there is no assurance that this development will not push water off onto surrounding properties. There's no guarantee in the PUD that it will not do so. items that have been submitted still do not provide the Commission with any graphic depiction of the proposed extent of the common area, which must enclose the 50-year urbanized water surface elevation. We still don't know where that's going to be. There is no indication of what the waterways are going to look like, whether they are rip-wrapped or whether other erosion control measures are undertaken, and the trees are going to have to be removed along the creek. You could not rip-wrap the creek without doing that. And of course, if you look at where the buildings are supposed to go on the plan that Mr. Kuhn submitted, they are building right up to the edge of the so-called urbanized flood area. So I don't see how the trees can be preserved. And the PUD does not, incidentally, make specific provisions for the preservation of trees. It leaves that to the specific plan, which is not before you today. In fact, the PUD document says that which healthy, mature trees will be protected will be revealed in the specific plan. So in that sense, you don't know what you're getting as far as the preservation of trees is concerned, and it's very important because they're part of the buffer from this area to adjoining residential neighborhoods. People often say that a PUD is in the nature of a tripartite contract between the developer, the city, and surrounding landowners. To the extent that that's an accurate characterization, it's important that the contract terms and conditions be clear and unambiguous, and in this case, they're not. For the last year, more than a year, this PUD has been like a box of chocolates. You still don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what you're going to get, and the surrounding landowners don't know what they're going to get. The staff report, of course, reflects those items which are left for another day, which trees, the lighting plan, the location of the dumpsters, none of that is known to you today. That and others will be subject to a specific plan to be submitted later. The gist of all this is that the applicant wants the zoning first, and then once he has the zoning, then he will reveal a lot of the other details. The TEs, of course, the staff wanted 70% brick veneer, rock, or stone masonry. The developer will now go to 60%, he says. The staff, of course, recommended 2 stories or 35 feet. The developer wants 3 stories and 45 feet. The only concession that he actually makes in the PUD document is that if a 3-story building is within 50 feet of a nearby residence, it will have upper-story windows with opaque glass. A few minutes ago, Mr. Kuhn said that they wouldn't be any closer than 185 feet, yet the PUD document provides that if they come within 50 feet, 3-story buildings have to have opaque glass in upper windows, so we don't really know which it is. The staff also wanted 50 feet of undisturbed wooded area along the west, the north, and the east. The developer originally was only willing to do 20. I'm not sure I understand what it is he's willing to do now. The density issue, and this may be perhaps the most important issue in terms of the public policy of this city. Up until today, we have never really heard the applicant say just exactly how much land he has to build on. Commissioner Gales had asked the applicant time and time again over the course of the last year, how much buildable land? Well, today, he says it's 9 acres, at last. Now, if he can build these units on 9 acres, he says he wants to do 240 units. Well, if he does 240 units on 9 acres, what's the density? 32. Can't escape that. I mean, unless my calculations are wrong, and I figured out 10 acres is 24 and 8 acres is 30. It wouldn't be 32, would it? Be something in between. A little more, a little less than 30. Let's say 28. The argument, though, is about how you calculate that. I get to 38 because I take into account the land upon which residents will be built. Mr. Kuhn takes into account the entire area of the subject property, everything that is owned by the developer. I can only rely on what the ordinance says, which is an expression of the public policy enunciated by our city council. And I put it in my most recent letter brief to you all, and here's what it says. This has to do with the calculation of gross density. The maximum number of dwelling units within a PUD or a SPUD shall be based on calculation of gross density, which shall be established in the PUD or SPUD master plan. Gross density shall be calculated by dividing the total land area to be developed for residential units, exclusive of arterial streets, by the number of dwelling units. Say again, the total land area to be developed for residential units. Now that doesn't say the total land area which the developer happened to purchase. It doesn't say the land that's reserved for common areas. It doesn't say include waterways. It says land area to be developed for residential units. Mr. Kuhn says that's 9 acres. The rest of this land can't be developed. It's too squishy. Now, this ordinance either means what it says or it doesn't. Mr. Kuhn has characterized the planning staff's view of this ordinance as calculating it the way he likes to calculate it. I don't know. I haven't really asked. I suppose I could ask Mr. Klaus, I could ask J.J., but let's suppose for the sake of this discussion that the staff says, no, we've been doing it the way Mr. Kuhn does it. We've been doing it that way for years. Well, there's a rule of law in Oklahoma that when you look at ordinances such as this, some weight is given to the way that people charged with its administration interpret it. People that deal with it day in and day out, their idea of how it should be construed is given considerable weight, but not when it's wrong. No matter how the staff may feel, no matter what it's done in the past, if their interpretation does not comport with what you see in black and white, then it can't be upheld. And if there's 9 acres and that's all for residential units, then the density comes out to around 28. Now, what's good or bad about that? Well, it's too high. That's Sardineville. If this land had not been zoned PUD 235A many years ago, if the developer came in off the street today, if Mr. Kuhn came in here today, and that was R1 land or AA land, and he said, I want you to zone this for a PUD, and I want you to give me 28, 30 units an acre, what would you say? You'd say no. You'd say, we're not going to do that. It's inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, and it's incompatible with surrounding land uses. We have R1 to the west, we have R1 to the north, we have R1 to the east at low densities. And now we're going to come in and put 28 units to the acre. The commission would say no. So the only leg up that the developer really has here is that he's already got 235A in place. Now, I happen to agree with Commissioner Yokel that it's probably not developable, but we would much rather have the original fourplexes and duplexes at 2 stories that this was zoned 4 years ago than we would high-density apartments at 3 stories. The 3 stories is out of scale. If he came in here and started from scratch and said, I want 3 stories and nearly 30 units an acre, what would most of the commissioners do? They would say, no, we can't give you that because it's just too glaringly incompatible with what's nearby. Now, what I'm asking the commission to do is look at the language in the ordinance and make your own judgment about how that ordinance should be read, regardless of what past practices may have been, and regardless of what Mr. Kuhn asserts. Old PUD 235A, not an ideal situation, but certainly closer to the kind of compatibility that the comprehensive plan requires. 3 stories, the density, 3 stories is too tall, the density is too great, the buffer is insufficient, and I think only 2 of us are going to speak today, and the other speaker will be Judy Cawthorn, who will talk to you about the buffer. She lives there and has better knowledge of it than I do. Trees are going to be lost, no question about it. Exterior building materials, you're not really sure exactly what you're going to get, and that's the whole gist of this. We've spent an entire year trying to figure out what it is you're being asked to approve. You still really don't know. And there's no guarantee, regardless of what kind of computer modeling you do, that this isn't going to push water off the property. There's no promise that it won't. You know, there's no assurance in the PUD that it won't. This is just not a good PUD. And if you look at the elevations of this elongated building, these are the kinds of apartments that we've seen in the city for years and years. They don't hold up. They don't do any good for surrounding landowners. It's just a potential disaster. And really, you denied it once, and I'm going to ask you today to deny it again. It just doesn't work in this area. I'm going to sit down now unless you have questions. I think Judy Cawthorn would like to speak, but I'll let the chairman look at the slips and see if she's the only one. But I think she would.
She's not the only one, but she may speak. You can come right to the front since no one's there. And Judy, give us your name and address, please.
I'm Judy Cawthon. I live at 16609 Sunny Hollow Road, and I immediately am adjacent to the property line to the east. I've asked to speak on the issue of what's been called the buffer. You've heard a 20-foot buffer, you've heard a 50-foot buffer, and I think somewhere I heard a 185-foot buffer, which I couldn't figure out looking at the site plan that we have. Now, there may be a new site plan that we have not seen. What I'd like, as I talk about what is referred to as the buffer, I'd like to pass these around. I just have one set of them.
Give them to Mike.
Because this is referred to as an undisturbed wooded area. It's referred to as vegetation that will provide a buffer for sound and sight. And what you're looking at is a picture taken from the creek, which is actually, as far as my property is concerned, actually about 20 feet on past my property. But this is the west side of the creek. And as you see, it's mostly native grasses, very small trees and bushes. I have several views so you can see that it's not just the same shot. You actually can see 164th Street from there through the buffer. And when I read the suggestion that there may need to be riprap in some areas, where I live is where the creek has that great big large cut-in, which has already taken out trees. So I'm assuming that's going to be one of the areas that will need riprap. I don't see how equipment can get in to put that riprap in that area without taking out what little there is there. There is one fairly mature tree that I'm guessing would have to come out in order to get the and I base that on the fact that if you look at the creek on the west side, they did come in and riprap that creek, about 3 years ago, I think, and all those trees came out. So I question whether or not what will need to be done to the creek in order to prevent erosion, as is suggested by your staff, that what few trees are there will still be there. So, and again, according to the site plan, the parking lot drawing is across the creek from where I live, which means that what vegetation is in the creek is very deep, will not buffer anything from that parking lot, and what trees were there will probably have to be taken out. If that site plan is actually how they're going to build, I will have day and night lights and noise directly across from my home. And I appeal to you all. I have listened to you be so sensitive to sight and noise in every one of these that you've discussed that have been protested. I appeal to you to please consider the fact that not only is it going to affect our property value, but actually our whole way of life, because we'll have noise of people coming and going from a 240-unit apartment building complex any time of day or night. And I just feel that this is absolutely not consistent with the surrounding property and definitely not with what Oklahoma City wants. And I thank you so much, because this has been long and I know you've listened to a lot.
Thank you. We got a question for you, I think.
Yes.
Or just your
I'm
picture.
sorry. Oh.
Do we have any questions of Judy?
Well,
Commissioners?
I just
Mike?
had, ma'am, if I could, just one consideration, just a question. They still can build PUD 235.
I understand that. I'm sorry. I understand that.
Okay. So you could still have apartments directly across the creek from where you are.
I understand that, yes.
Okay. So if I could sum up your primary objection, is it that it's the apartments themselves, or is it the increased height?
Primarily, it's the density. If you look at 9 acres, as Mr. Groves talked to you about, if you look at 9 acres to be actually built in the type of apartment complex that would work on 9 acres, you would not have that many parking places. You would not have to. If you notice on that site plan, everything is just, I think somebody used the word sardine, and that's what it looks like to me when I look at it. And so I'm talking about a larger number on a smaller space that just does not go in terms of density and the number of cars that you're going to have coming and going. You know, when you talk about 240 units, you're talking about, I'm sure, about 500 cars, because I assume these are apartments where, in many of them, more than one person will live.
Okay.
And I don't think on 9 acres, some other apartment complex being built would do that. So I'm using the density answer to your question.
All right, thank you.
Randy Lewis.
I know this is going on, so I'll be brief. Randy Lewis, I live in the Lexington Addition at 16613 Sunny Hollow. I won't belabor the other points. We have seen 2 site plans on this. The very first site plan we saw only had 2 entrances along 164th, did not have the amenities that you all requested. Now we see this site plan that's in front of you now. The current PUD only allows for 2 entrances along 164th. The applicant is asking for 3. That concerns us for the traffic along 164th Street there. A traffic study was requested. I don't know if it was ever done for that, but I would be interested in hearing more about that. The only other thing I might add that hasn't been addressed today is there was a safety concern, and we brought to you an article in the last time that this was denied of a child that actually drowned in this creek. So this amount of density and children living in there does concern us that could happen again. So,
thank you. Brian, any response to? Yeah. Comment? Sure. Give us your name and address.
I'm Lydia Leslie. I'm the protestants engineer, 2936 V. Esperanza. I just wanted to comment on the tree comment. According to the flood study that I have reviewed, that Mr. Kuhn is going to, in this plan, is modifying the creek bank. And he is correct, he is modifying some of the embankment below the top of the bank, but he is also modifying the top of the bank as well. And according to some of the photographs that we have, the aerial photographs, the trees, it's very hard to discern where the trees are located and the current survey that I have does not locate the actual tree placement. So trees will be destroyed when they are doing the fill and cut for the channel.
Okay, thank you.
I'll be brief. There was a couple comments made that we have not shown the 50-year urbanized flood line, which I showed, and I have been showing for months. So we did do that. The original PUD had a 20-foot buffer, and in our PUD, we say there's a 50-foot undisturbed area of trees, and it was commented that I didn't ever tell you what that was going to be. It's been in the document for months. The dumpsters are shown on your site plan, and this is a site plan that was provided to the neighbors prior to Christmas, back when we were, and it's been modified with the new flood line, but the dumpsters are shown. The 50-foot limit for the opaque glass for second-story windows, my building is, the one that's 185 feet is over on the far west side. That's a city staff comment. They want that in everything that's apartments. They say no windows within 50 feet. And that's just something they ask us to put in. So I'm not trying to say, okay, I'm going to come back tomorrow and say, now I'm 50 feet. I'm telling you, that's our site plan. We can't go past that. The density calculation, and I didn't know I've usurped, but he said I usurped something. It talks about that the gross density is calculated dividing the total land area. It doesn't say total buildable area. And your staff, and whether they're right or wrong, which he says whether they're right or wrong, your staff even says that this is a decrease in density. So it's the way that density has been figured for a long time. Every residential deal we do, when you have common areas, that's non-buildable, but it's still calculated in your total area that you're doing. And I appreciate her clearing up the deal on the trees. Yes, on the west side of the creek, which is why we're doing a flood study, we are going to modify the creek bank on the west side, not the creek bank, but the top of the creek bank and some of the other areas. So some of the trees, yeah, on the west side, inside of our property, a lot of those trees will go because it's developable area. So, but on the east side, we're not taking out the trees. I've given you that 50-foot. You've got the site plan. I'm not doing any taking out in the trees on the east side of the creek. So I think I answered all the questions that at least I had or comments I wanted to address.
Okay, any questions of Mr. Kuhn?
Curiosity, with respect to 235, and this is a historical perspective, was there ever 14.52 developable acres in this?
The 14.52 is the density calculation.
Was the density calculation?
You could do 14.52 units per acre on 24 acres.
On 24 acres?
Yes, which is how we calculate density.
And so now, your calculation is how many? Now,
I think
you're still 24.
24 acres.
You're still 24.
We're still at the same amount of land, but it's less density now. I mean, we're at 9.9 according to how staff calculates it and how we've calculated it for years. And that's how the original PUD 35 was calculated. So.
Okay, so on the calculation methodology, density has not changed 235 to current. Is that right? Am I missing something?
Well.
In number of units.
Yeah, we've gone down because we're at 9.9 now.
Right.
And I think whether someone can build it or not, I think someone, if they wanted to, could. They now know some more answers than they'd known before. I think my point has always been, is this a better PUD than what you have now? And I feel like it has. I feel like it's a lot more safeguards. It says you don't know what you're going to get. You're going to get 60% brick, stone, or rock, I believe it says. So he said you don't know what you're getting. You do know what you're getting. You don't know if it's brick, stone, or rock, but it's one of those three.
Nick?
Mr. Chairman, we've been inundated with stuff. We've asked for flood information. I'd like to hear from Adair what his take on the flood study is.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. Adair Agrawal with Public Works Engineering. I think some of the comments that were covered by Mr. Kuhn and Mr. Groves, I would rather have you ask a question and I will respond to it unless you want me to address a specific part of the flood study.
Well, okay, first question. Mr. Kuhn has shown us drawings that alter or show a new floodplain calculation. Do you agree with that? Do you agree with his concept there, and is that what this flood study?
Yes, we looked at the conceptual plan, and We had some comments when the flood study was turned in first in February 23rd of last month, and we had 7 comments related to that flood study. And then they have turned in a second check print that addresses most of it, but let me highlight the comments that were important related to this conceptual plan. One of them is flood study showed that the channel had velocities exceeding 5 feet per second. Most natural channels don't sustain that kind of flood velocities without erosion that can encroach into or cause bank erosion. So that's why we requested that they provide bank protection. So that was the riprap or any method that will sustain that velocity. I think maximum velocities are up to 10.8 feet per second. So that will require the treatment. And then, of course, some of the slopes, even natural slopes, exceed 3:1, 3 horizontal to 1 vertical. And that's also not sustainable at that velocity. And when you put development closer to creek banks, then it becomes concern of ours. And lastly, the last one is, of course, there was some evidence of rise in the flood elevation. Maximum was about only 2.6 inches at one cross-section. But it's still, based on the FEMA requirement and our own requirement, any development cannot impact somebody else's property without their written consent. So those are the 3 things that we really stressed upon. There are other issues like 404 permit, common areas, and basically doing the paperwork for submittal to the FEMA. And the second check print did address erosion issue by putting riprap. They show the slopes at 3:1, and they're showing that there is no increase in the flood elevation, 100-year urbanized flood elevation off their property. So that's kind of a summary of it. So after looking at the second check print, which was turned in 9th of this month, 2 days ago, and basically with that submittal, we don't have concern. Those 3 concerns were addressed that we really were looking for in this check print of the flood study.
Got one more question on both of his drawings under the new PUD and under 235A. He has drawn in, and he commented on the north side there, a detention area. He said, but the city may not let us put detention in there.
No,
Have you looked at that, and would you or would you not allow that detention?
Yes, we will. It really, because this area is so small compared to the whole basin, that is 13.6 square miles. That's its 8,700 acres of land, drainage area. Whether you put a detention or not is really not going to have any impact on the peak flow.
I understand that, but you would not prohibit him from putting those in?
No, we won't.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Adair? Commissioners? Thank you. Brian?
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
If this was developed as single-family homes, you would require the same requirements to shore up that bank, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Okay. So however it's developed, either way, it's going to have that riprap to protect the creek. And as the lady said, it's already eroding now. So.
And just to add to his comment, it's in 16.6, Article 16.6 of Chapter 16.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Eric, anything else, or is the discussion up to us?
Just about, Mr. Chairman, but I did want to refute something that Mr. Coon said about this density business. Let's assume, just to show you how much sense that theory makes or doesn't, let's assume that you bought 100 acres of land. 90 of it is in the floodplain, and that leaves you 10 units, or 10 acres where you can build residential units. What Mr. Coon's argument amounts to is this, that of that 100 acres, you can only build on 10 acres, 1/10 of it, but you would get a density calculation based on the whole 100. Now, that's the kind of accounting methods that I think got us into trouble in this country within the last couple years. You know, that's just nonsense. But if you take that theory to the example I've just mentioned, that means you get the benefit of 90 acres of land that you can't build on when you calculate your density. So think how high the density could be for that 10 acres. You know, it isn't sensible and it isn't fair. It isn't fair to the city. I mean, it affronts the public policy of the city, and it certainly isn't fair to surrounding landowners. So the density on this, I think we just have to face up to it, is somewhere near 30 units an acre. I think that's key to understanding what's wrong with this PUD. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nick?
I believe I asked staff that calculation question, and yes, staff does use the gross acreage. And I believe where that came from is when we had amended the plan 10 years ago, we put a provision in to allow for clustering housing in certain situations. I believe it's been carried over from that. That may be somewhat of an overkill and a miscarriage of what we had intended to allow for the clustering, but I believe that's the history of that density deal. I agree with Brian. The fact remains, what is buildable, they can build on. The other 15 or 16 acres, whatever it is, obviously they can't. My concern with this has all along been we had 235 in place that allows apartment. And I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. In all probability, if 235 was that viable, in the last 24 years, someone would have stepped up and done something about it. That aside, I don't care to get into that argument of whether it's viable or not viable, whether this applicant can or cannot develop under 235. What we have before us is a new application for something different than 235. It has the same underlying zoning in it, but I submit to you that if this came to us, if this land was zoned anything other than for multifamily, and it came before this commission today, we would take a quick glance at it and say it's not appropriate for this site and deny it and go forward. And that's what I propose we do. I move for denial of this application, and if the developer would like to develop under 235, he certainly has that right.
I'll second that motion with some comments. The reason why I would second the motion is that with respect to the interpretation of developable land, I guess the ordinance or whatever it is you were reading, Mr. Groves, my interpretation of that would definitely be that's what it is. The other thing that Mr. Gales indicated about the clustering on a particular project, it was several years ago that we were trying to get more open space in rural areas, and so the clustering, that developable land was the whole thing. You could develop the whole thing, but clustering here, you would get more open space and more density within a small area. This particular application, I also agree with Mr. Gales that were it not for 235, it would just be, this is way too much for the area. It's incompatible. It's like, you know, putting my foot into Cinderella's slippers. It just isn't gonna. It doesn't fit with what's going on. Far too much density, no open space, jammed in 3-story apartment buildings, 2-story apartment buildings, parking lots all around, flood study, irrespective of that issue. It's just the nature of the beast that has been described, and these 3 stories looming up 45 feet. I really don't. It's just not appropriate, and I would, as I said, I second your motion.
Any other discussion before we vote, Commissioners?
I just don't know if we're getting, quite frankly, I don't know how I'm going to vote, still. I don't know, I mean, whether, I'm not a real estate developer, I don't know. I think that there are a lot of aspects of the current PUD that are far superior to 235. Construction materials, additional green space. I don't know. In some ways, I appreciate the protestants, but I don't know about the trade they're making. I'm just not absolutely sure that that's a good trade, because as sure as I sit here, you know, somebody, you know, there's a person for every pew, and somebody will develop 235 to the maximum extent, and the trade will be not, whether you like 235 or not, it's gone, etc. The trade will be cheap in next to high-end area, because they're going to get an uplift. I mean, it's a common development pattern. We rail against. Eric has railed against it several times. Cheap next to expensive. That's what I'm fearful of may happen in this context with an unrestricted construction material, green zone, buffering. Some of the things that I think I understand that the height restriction, I due respect to that. I just don't know. I'm not convinced that this is a good trade. So,
Janice?
I'm frankly surprised at where this discussion has ended up. I really am. Being no great fan of apartment complexes myself, I have to say that I think that to say that, 235 would have been developed if it could have been, we're not even going to consider that. It's not worth talking about. It's not the way we do things here. And I can't imagine how many times I have heard that discussion, that this is what they're allowed to do now. That has to be considered. That has to be taken into account. And to say that we're not going to take it into account in this case, to me, is surprising. Whether it should have been, could have been, would have been, or developed in the past the way it was written or not, it is zoning that permits multifamily development. And frankly, with all the window dressing and discussion and requirements and the hoops that have been jumped through here today, I haven't really heard anybody say anything other than the fact that these people don't want apartments built on this land. And I think that decision's already been made, and that's the way developers do zoning. There are those patterns all over the city. You don't develop your single-family residential protest before you go in and ask for zoning for multifamily or commercial. And this is a piece of ground that was zoned a long time ago to be what these people are proposing that it be now. The question about how you decide density, to me, is a total red herring. If you apply the same formula to both PUDs, then what difference does it make whether it's X plus Y or whether it's Z plus B? If you're applying it to both, then you've got an answer either way you come out with it. I have to say that I'm sort of in the camp with Commissioner Hensley, which doesn't happen all that often. But to me, there are so many more controls on this development than exist on the development of the property currently. And I think that this is a better PUD than the one that exists now. And for that reason, I would vote in favor of it. I totally support these people's right to come down here and object to the development of this PUD. I also understand their concerns. I think we have gone the extra mile to require the applicant to address those concerns. The delays and the time that have been put into this, the additional work by our staff, which, by the way, I applaud, kind of gotten ahead of themselves in terms of the process and how they look at things. A lot of times we do these developments and we leave all these questions to them to sort out later. We haven't done that here. I think we've deferred to the questions and concerns raised by the surrounding residents. But the bottom line is, I haven't really heard anybody say anything other than they don't want apartments here. And as far as I'm concerned, that decision got made a long time ago. This is a better PUD than the PUD that exists now, and I'm going to vote in favor of it.
Any other discussion? Todd?
I agree with what has just been said. I just keep thinking, if I lived here and I backed up to this, what would I rather have? Whether it's a lesser of two evils, whether it's however you want to view that, I've either got 350 units or 240, and I don't know. I came into this. I have a sister-in-law that lives on Sunny Hollow, and we've had discussions, and I was completely against this, and today I just look at it going, I just don't know. I think that if I moved in there and 235 if I knew that was coming, I would have bought in there. But the constraints that are on the proposed PUD, I am considerably more in favor of than what is existing, and I feel for whatever happens either way. But I'm going to have to agree with Commissioners Hensley and Powers.
I'd like to know, who knows whether 235 will be built or not? We don't know that.
That's just the veiled threat.
Well, no, I don't think it. I think
it may not be.
I think there's a good possibility that it could be built.
It can be built.
Okay, and I think that's the measure that we have to use. And I think if the people would look at it, and if I, like you were saying, if I backed up to there, I sure would rather have the new PUD than the old PUD.
Jim, I agree. There are controls in the new PUD. But if 235 was so viable and you could actually squeeze those number of units in there that Brian has drawn and market them, they'd have done that in the first place. They just saved themselves a year. And I'm not saying they won't come back and, quote, punish us for that, but what I am saying in reality is, if you look at this application, if it came before you, would you approve this application? No, you wouldn't. And if 235 came before you today, you certainly wouldn't. But we don't have that choice. 235 is on the books. It's been on the books for 24 years. That land has sat there for 24 years. Todd makes a good point. Would you rather have 340 or fewer? Well, obviously, on a mathematical basis, that's a no-brainer. And yet, we sat here and heard the neighbors consistently tell us, we realize we can have higher density, and we would rather have that than higher elevation. So I don't know.
I agree with that, but still, even though it's been 24 years, it's been, that long, there's still that possibility.
Absolutely.
And,
absolutely.
I just think we'd be better off with the new PUD with a little bit more restriction.
I have
a lot more restriction.
James?
I have one observation I'd like to ask Brian, if I could.
Sure.
When I look at the site plan, really all the buildings are kind of concentrated quite a distance away from any property lines, except the one building on the extreme west side that's standing out on its own, and that's a 3-story. if that was a two-story, I think that would really make it palatable to me.
The one on the far west?
This far west building that's on the west side of the parking lot. If that one building there, because it's closer to residential, if that was a two-story building, then I'd be okay with it, because you got the two stories kind of wrapping, and the 3 stories are real close into the center where it has less impact. I could live with that.
We can do that.
Well, then that would be all right with me. Cut that down to a 2-story building.
What just happened?
To the extreme west building. All the shaded buildings are 3-story.
All the shaded are 3-story, so we're going to make that now a 2-story?
The extreme one on the left.
The far west.
Right, so now you see how the 2 stories kind of just wrap around the 3 stories, and the 3 stories are condensed in the center, far away from the property lines.
How many units?
Step on 164.
in
I'm
that
okay with
building?
that.
Just
There'd be 8 units.
Second line.
So we could
be down to 232 from 240.
No, I may add them to the end of another building. I will just make that one 2-story.
Units are staying the same.
Units will stay the same, but that one would go to
to different spots.
That happens to be the one that's 185. So you're right, that's the closest building to any residential property.
Yeah.
So that gets the closest building to the west side of the property down to 2-story.
Yes.
It's getting a little better.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor to deny the application. So get ready to vote. Cast your votes. The application to deny, or excuse me, the vote to deny is denied. That means we need another motion.
I'll make a motion to approve it with the modification been stated.
Yes.
Could I have just clarification? Is that 60% brick, 40% ephes, drive it, the 3-story, 45 feet, and then that 2-story?
Change that to a 2-story building, a 3-story to a 2-story building.
The 60% brick, rock, or stone.
That's correct.
Right.
Sir.
Okay, now we have a motion to approve item 10 as conditioned. Cast your votes. And it is approved 6-3.
Okay.
Item 9 has been continued to April the 8th. Item 10 is C-6194, which is a preliminary plat of Ironstone, located south of Northwest 164th Street and east of Portland Avenue in Ward 8.
Good afternoon. I'm Tim Smith. I'm the developer of Ironstone. We have reviewed the TEs. We agree with TE 1, 4, and 6. TE 7 has been resolved. We would like to discuss items 3 and item 5. And then also we'd ask for a variance on item 2.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. On item 3, discusses the entrances. And we believe that we have met that, we've met the subdivision regulations. We have 2 entrances on Northwest 164th Street. And those 2 entrances will be installed in Phase 1.
They're talking about the northwest corner of the property, and the entrance is actually outside the boundaries of their site. It's got a dotted line, goes up to 164th Street.
Well, is that your property?
Yes, it is.
To the west?
Yes, it is.
Why didn't you include it in this?
In the PUD.
Just out of curiosity, how come you didn't go an extra 100 yards and put this in here?
It's
the PUD has 3 tracks,
A residential?
That Iron Boulevard is part of another tract in the PUD?
Yes.
But that entrance will be put in with this?
Yes, sir, it will be put in right now. And then on item 5, we had a traffic study done at the staff's request. And this the traffic study says that we do not need a westbound left turn lane in Phase 1. The staff has asked for that, and part of their reasoning in there is that it should alleviate disrupting future residences. And by having the second entrance that is put in on Phase 1, there should not be much distraction or disruption to the residences. Our reason for this request is that Northwest 164th Street is stated to be widened. And so when we get ready to do Phase 2, we felt like it would be redundant to put in a left turn lane and then turn around and they widen the road. When they widen the road, it goes away anyway. It is not required by the traffic study on Phase 1. And so if the road has not been approved or been improved by the time we get ready to do Phase 2, then we'll address it at the Phase 2 time.
So you'll put it in at Phase 2. Address it means you'll come back down here and talk to us about it.
Well, if the traffic study says when we get to 200 lots.
Okay.
So the first phase is 119 lots. So if the road, Northwest 164th Street, has not been widened and improved at that point in time, then we will put if that's what they want us to do, then we will put the left turn lane in, just like the traffic study says.
Then, Tim, could we back up to when you were talking about the entrance? Can we back up to the variance on TE2? With that entrance in there, this is a question for staff, I guess. With that entrance in there, is there still a need for the stub to the east, or a requirement for that? Because now we're going to meet the public safety deal, and the streets to the east are private street. So there will, I would assume at some point be a crash gate there, no connectivity. So what do we achieve by that?
It's less of a need. With being gated, it wouldn't serve much purpose. With the second entrance up north, it's still required by the subdivision regulations, regardless. So it would need the variance. But being a gated street, it wouldn't serve to alleviate any traffic.
How much common area do you have measured by acreage?
This is Mark Ritchie, our engineer. He can answer that.
As soon as I find it here. I believe it's 3.22 acres, which slightly exceeds the percentage required by the...
Give us your name and address for the record, please.
He said his name.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it.
Just
Mark Ritchie.
Thank you.
Does that include counting these two-foot strips up here in the very top at
Correct.
the entrance gate? I'm kind of... were you serious about that?
Common area A and B.
I mean, how big are those? Just so I'm sure.
They are 35 foot measured east and west each.
East and west.
And what they're meant to do is try to set the tone for this community by having a more decorative entryway, heavily landscaped, and the developers plan to do an entryway wall there, So it'll be a really nice look, and I think it'll
It's an
improve-
entryway.
Absolutely. That's where the entryway is.
Is it usable as an amenity, as what I commonly view
Well,
a
the
common area to
subdivision
be?
regulations require a certain percentage of open space.
Right.
But then of that open space, 130 square feet of per each home, for each home, is reserved for recreational use. And that's why the developers chose to do Common Area C and Common Area E further down in the development. And on the preliminary plat, they've committed to installing junior soccer fields, which is a shorter, better suited for small kids on the west side over here. In Common Area C, there will be multiple junior soccer fields there. And then in Common Area E, you'll note that we have the two elbow cul-de-sacs north and south of that common area. Those elbow cul-de-sacs will discourage traffic. In essence, everyone there where it's labeled 30, everyone from there west will drive west, and everyone where lot 29 in Block 2 is labeled, everyone there will go north. So we will have, for all practicality, zero traffic in those cul-de-sacs, and that suits it very well for toddlers and small children to be in this common area where the playground facilities will be installed.
Mike, have you found Common Area D yet? I find A, B,
Yeah,
C, and E.
isn't it
I found
down
it.
here?
I just wanted to know how long it took you.
Common Area D was installed at the request of Water Wastewater Engineering on the 5th floor of Public Works. The reason for it,
pipeline,
and the reason for it is in planning for Tract B, which is the next tract to the west. It's platted, or it's zoned for multifamily apartments, and then Tract A further west is commercial. They want us to have that access through there to circulate, or to pass a 12-inch water main through there. After we circulate it down Ironstone Drive, the 12-inch water main will go straight west into the apartment tract. That's a requirement that they made so that we can loop the water facility. And water mains can't, of that size and nature, can't just go through an easement. So we had to reserve a common area there.
Either J.J. or Russell, we have a staff recommendation of denial. What is that based on?
Mainly the numbers of lots and the uncertainty on the access drives, all the traffic going out on Northwest 164th Street. The westernmost drive is a shared, or drive, a street, is shared with a large multifamily tract that could develop with up to 560 units. So you combine all that traffic on Northwest 164th, we felt it was much better to require the collector street, which is required in the PUD, to connect to Portland, come through the commercial tract, and into the multifamily tract. It's not required to connect to the single-family tract, but it just makes sense that that collector come through, relieve some of that traffic, and circulate through the subdivision.
How would we do that? Hypothetically, how would we accomplish that?
We're requesting that with Phase 3, when they come in with their final plat, that it include the collector out to Portland.
So Phase 3 would be?
The south end of the subdivision, so Ironstone Drive coming south, 159th Street going west would be a collector, and then connect to the required collector in the PUD and go on out to Portland.
If you'll note, on the first parallel street south of 164th, very good, where the cursor's located, that section, I believe it's 164th Terrace, we have upsized that. We've addressed staff's concerns with consultation with our traffic engineer, and we have to think about human nature when we look at this. Human nature for anyone that lives in this development is going to be to go north to 164th to get out of the development, because that's just how the layout works. Now, to facilitate having two accesses to meet subdivision regulations, we've added the second access over there and connected the two with the 32-foot collector, 60-foot right-of-way. That will satisfy the subregs on the two access points, emergency access. It'll also prevent the developers see the front 20 acres of commercial developing fairly rapidly after the highway is constructed. A lot of these homes will utilize the facilities in that 20 acres. So we have the choice, do we put all of these 420 homes out onto 164th to go west to the stoplight, to go south, and then somehow work their way back into the closest commercial area to their home, or do we keep them off of the public thoroughfares and bring them over on 164th Terrace into the commercial tracts where they're likely trying to go fill up their cars or buy gas or office or whatever?
Where are the commercials on?
Why don't you want to do the, what I'll say is the 159th Street connector to the west through the commercial area? Why don't you want to extend it all the way through the commercial? I think that was his question.
And I didn't do a good job answering why we didn't do that.
And the TE3, the last sentence of TE3 is what he's asking.
Right, where you want it, where staff has asked that it go straight west and tie back into Portland.
To have a
right
tie-in with Phase 3.
Portland is Highway 74, as all of you know, and ODOT has already taken that land out there, and that road is stated to be upgraded, an extension of Hefner Parkway. That has been going on for quite a while, but they supposedly have a set of plans that they're working on to do that. We, at this point in time, don't believe, based on our talks with ODOT, that whether the city would allow us to tie into Portland or not, that ODOT, we don't believe, would ever allow us to tie into Portland the way it is. It's a two-lane road. You'd be tying a main road into it in the middle of the section. And I don't believe they'd ever let us do that with the traffic that's there today. The reason that we agreed to go forward, and it's not required by the PUD, the reason that we agreed to put the second entrance on 164th Street was so that we would be able to go forward in developing our subdivision and not rely on what happens on Highway 74, not what happens based on the stub street that goes back in through Regency Point. Because if for some reason Regency Point did not do the last phase of their development or whatever, we would get to a point that we couldn't go forward. We're reliant on someone else. And that's what we've tried not to do. We believe that we, in good faith, have put in two major entrances that will feed this subdivision, and that's the reason that we don't want to go west. We don't feel like we can achieve going west.
Well, we were informed just as late as last week that Highway 74 will be a two-lane each side divided highway, but between 150th and 164th, there would be a service road.
Let me follow up on that, JJ. The PUD for the other two phases that we don't see on here, has that collector coming from that service road? Is that what you're saying? That it runs into the multifamily, it just doesn't come across the multifamily?
The PUD requires a collector at the south end extending through the commercial and into the multifamily tract.
So to be clear, Tim, what we're talking about is that street, whatever it is and wherever it goes west, is going to be there, but the way it's proposed to just run into the multifamily tract, not cut across to it to connect to the residential.
Absolutely. It's supposed to, the way it was set up and what we agreed to in PUD was that that road would come in off of Portland, it would run north to 164th Street, it would be the road that everything would stem off of, it would go to Tract B, which is the apartment tract, and be a back access point for the apartment tract. We anticipate it probably would be gated in the fire type deal. I don't know. It may be used by all the apartments, but that's what we agreed to on the PUD, never to access it into the residential part. And what JJ, the statement he made about the access roads, I'm not disputing what he was told, but we have been in litigation with ODOT for at least 2 years. We have been told one thing after another thing on what's going to happen with that access road. And so I have no faith in what JJ was told happening. And I don't think he can guarantee us that. Nobody else can either. They have their own set of rules, and we have to go by them. And I can't guarantee that. And therefore, we don't feel like that. We feel like we've met the subdivision regulations. We want, just like that's the reason we've made this separate entrance at the front, is so that the residential can flow through the apartments and through into the commercial, which is what we want to happen. And that's what we've done at the front of the subdivision.
Just so I'm clear, Tim, where this is talking about down here at 159th, the directly west of where that would come out, which is right there where common area D is going to be apartments. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so carry the argument about we can't promise you what ODOT is. We're going to put multifamily there when we're not going to have access for the residential tract. The two seem to me to be, they don't seem to fit. That argument doesn't seem to mesh too well with me. I mean, just maybe I need some additional clarity on it, but when you say, we don't know if ODOT's going to do an access road, but we're going to put an apartment complex right there.
Well, let me put it.
What's the difference in routing a few more houses out through there?
Well, I think, one, if you go to the very back of the subdivision, like what that is, then to access it into what the apartments are, you know, you're not going to have, the residential people are not going to drive to the back of the subdivision to come back out. When they can come out the front, they can achieve getting to the same place. Does that make sense, what I said?
Well, kind of, but if I could, my problem is all the traffic in the subdivision has to go north to get out. Every day, it has to go north down these long, non-curvilinear, straight streets that will be all going straight north to two entrances to get out. As a design, it's just not very appealing. And maybe, and I don't know, but I mean, I see 3 racetracks here as I look at it. At 8 o'clock every morning, everybody going to be getting on their 3 streets to get out. And maybe it's just a challenging piece of property. I'm not being necessary, but it just doesn't seem to me that everybody's going to have to go straight north and straight south to get in and out at same times every day. And that design aspect of it is a little troubling all the way through. I don't know. It's not appealing in that traffic aspect, in the fact that we're dumping everybody out on the 164th right now, which is a 2-lane road, which will be, I know it's going to be improved. It needs to be desperately, and I know you guys know that. But with no other access there, that just seems to me to be a challenge, ignoring Regency there.
Well, we met. Go ahead.
Commissioner, I'm Butch Curry, 316 Northwest 144th. Maybe I can help address what you're asking here, just for a sec. The access to Portland is non-existent at this point. Your subdivision regulations require 2 access points to the subdivision. If we put an access down here and take the one out of north, when we get through this first phase, we may not have access to 164th at that time.
I don't think anyone's suggesting take out the one on 164th. The question was, on TE3, why shouldn't TE3, the last sentence of TE3, also be done? It's not an either-or thing.
Well, we do know that ODOT is changing the plans that they've given us along 164th at this point. We have an agreement with the city through the PUD that we can have an access going through Track A and Track B on the south side of this property. We don't have an agreement with ODOT to that effect. We don't know that we're ever going to get access to that service road at that point, if there's ever a service road there. But we do know at this point that we can't get access to Highway 74 as it is today.
Yeah,
What we're trying to do is prevent us getting through Phase 1 or Phase 2 of our subdivision and then be stuck and not be able to develop any further if the highway hasn't been constructed. It was supposed to be constructed several years ago.
Okay, for sake of argument.
Yeah.
And guys, I'm going to preface this comment with, we've spent about 4 cases today where we've negotiated them on the horseshoe after we've said we're not going to do this, and we're doing it again. And here I go, okay? Butch, what the question here is why won't you put the street out to the west along the south side, whether it goes anywhere or not? The staff has asked for that in TE3, okay? It's not whether or not we're going to trade one on the north. It's not whether or not this will ever develop. If you don't build a street from the west, it wouldn't come across here. We got that. But it has nothing to do with whether it develops. It has to do with the staff made a recommendation, and I haven't heard why that recommendation shouldn't be adhered to. That's the only question.
Commissioner Gales, I can give you the answer.
Great.
We could put a driveway out that way, and we could extend it all the way to Portland.
Stop.
But it won't meet sight distance. Stewart
Stop.
and traffic would not allow it.
Stop. Staff's comment is to alleviate the potential decrease in level of service on 164th, a collector street should be provided Phase 3 of this plat, extending east to Portland, extending through the plat on northwest. I interpret that as running it out the south end of, like out this way.
Right. And I hope everybody can hear me, but this is Portland.
Well, but my point is, these two tracks, this is going to be apartments, this is going to be commercial.
Right.
There is going to be a collector street here to service these two things.
Not until the highway's there.
Well,
We can't do those.
I understand. But when you build this road, staff's question is, why can't that road, instead of dead-ending here at the multifamily, be extended across and service this housing addition? It's a simple question. Yes or no? And why it can't be done?
As developers, we would rather not run the run that road and attach the apartments to the back end of that residential subdivision. That's
Perfect answer.
Our option as a developer. We don't want them to connect.
Okay. Good. That was the only...
Sorry,
It
I
was a
was
simple
missing
question.
it.
Maybe we're premature in looking at this site and developing it with other unknowns, like the
Perhaps.
infrastructure around it.
There are some other issues, absolutely. But that was one sentence in a TE that didn't seem to get resolved.
Well, based upon
I think maybe we are premature, and I kind of agree with Mike. There's 2 streets on this thing that look like racetracks, and I think there needs to be something done with the layout of the development with consideration of what the staff has said on the westerly access. And I don't know that I could vote for this today, the way it's laid out.
With due respect,
without those other considerations, and I just don't think we we know enough about this thing to do anything about it today.
With due respect, that TE was a surprise to us. We met with staff. We met with JJ and Kathy, and we asked them about that entrance. We sat right down there and asked them about it. We did not want to negotiate this at the Horseshoe either. This isn't our first time. We don't want to stand up here and do this. We felt like we were going to walk in here with one TE that we would have to argue or discuss with you. That TE was going to be the variance. The variance came about because of all the protests and other reasons with the private streets and all that stuff. The things, we sat down and talked with JJ and Kathy specifically about these two entrances on 164th Street, and we were told that that was not a problem. This TE, when it came up with the exit to 164th Street, was a surprise to us as much as anybody. The second TE on the traffic study, if you pay for a traffic study, we felt like that the traffic study, whatever the traffic study said needed to be done, is what we agreed to do. The traffic study says nothing needs to be done in Phase 1. Yet, staff is asking us to put this left turn lane in.
Traffic studies are prepared so that our staff can evaluate the data.
I understand.
And they're free to draw conclusions from it different than the traffic study.
I do understand that.
As well. So, I mean, that's the point is they then apply their judgment to what you submit. So
right.
A traffic study submitted isn't by itself binding, in other words.
And I understand that. But the point I'm trying to make is that we've had the meetings, we've deferred it, we've tried to settle everything outside of here someplace else, and we've done that in good faith. And so, I mean, I understand your concern, but we feel like that we have met the subdivision regulations and that we in good faith have tried to do this, and we have a good subdivision, and, you know, one person's opinion of a design is different than another person's. But that's why you have regulations, and we feel like that we have met those. So we'd like you to approve it for us.
We have someone signed up to speak, so we'll now let him come up. Randall Fudge. Bring your note up and give it to Mr. Fudge, if you give us your name and address.
Yes, it's Randall Fudge, 16316 Dustin Lane. Okay. I live in Regency Point. The commission mentioned the Stubb Street to the east into Regency Point, and that was one of our big concerns. Was since we're in compliance and we have no, as far as I know, plans for a corresponding Stubb Street, it was just going to be a crash gate, and it's private street, so it may never be used. So that was one of our big concerns. And the primary reason why we oppose this plat, though, is the high density as it's laid out now. As it abuts Regency Point, you've got several places where there are 3 lots to every one of Regency Points, and at one point 4 lots. Now, we did meet with the developer outside prior to this hearing. He says he's tried to work things outside this horseshoe in good faith. I question that. I got the impression there were no concessions made, such as a nice wall or something to separate these additions. We have a nice wall to the east with Muirfield, and we're of the opinion that good fences make good neighbors. So I am a little confused with the 2 major access points that they are now asking for. As I understand subdivision regulations, you have to have a main access onto an arterial for every 200 lots proposed, and they're proposing over 400. And so it's my understanding that these two access points to the north is to comply with 400 of those lots. And yet, in your all staff report, it indicates that there's going to be over 4,100 daily trips in and out of this subdivision, and that this would cause the level of service on Northwest 164th to drop from an A to a C even after it is widened to 4 lanes, and possibly drop to a level of service of D, which it's my understanding is defined as approaching unstable flow. Our main objection is the density of this project. It's too many. 400 lots. That translates 800, 900 cars. We do appreciate them asking to remove the stub street to the east. Or perhaps that's just trying to comply with the staff recommendation, but there are other numerous reasons that the property owners of Regency Point oppose this, but it primarily stems from the density. I'm sure we'd be much more agreeable to having this developed next to us if it wasn't such a high density. The staff recommends a denial or conditional approval of this plat, and we support the recommendation of denial. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Bunt.
Good afternoon, everybody. I live in the cul-de-sac.
Your name and address first, for the record.
Greg, last name is Bunt, and the address is 16304 Stephanie Court, Edmond. I live in the cul-de-sac that borders this development, and you know the lots in our neighborhood are a third of an acre, quarter of an acre, and sometimes larger. It's not just the density. It's you're going to put in, this property borders Rose Creek to the north, Regency Point to the east. You've got Esperanza, Muirfield. These are really nice neighborhoods.
Your better argument is traffic and infrastructure, not...
Well, it's the density. I mean, it's bigger lots, bigger homes, putting in a fence between us, we're all fine with that. The traffic to the north, it's bad enough out there in the mornings. It's to get north from 164th, just to get to Memorial is a 20-minute trip already. And if you pile all these houses and people in, it becomes a larger disaster to just get out of the neighborhoods in the morning, especially if you're going to put the sub-road into Regency Point. That just increases the traffic in our development with all sorts of children, et cetera, on those streets. It makes for a dangerous situation in the morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioners, Nick?
TE5 called for the 164th Street improvement. The applicant does not agree with that. I'd like to hear from traffic on that one. They want it. They want it for a reason. I'd like to know why.
I don't think Stewart's still here.
Oh, he went home for supper. Oh, sorry, guys, we need to go home for supper. As I understand this, TE3 is not agreed to, TE5 is not agreed to.
We will agree to putting in a stub street on the south end of the subdivision to eventually go out to Portland in Phase 3. If that's what we need to do, we don't know that it can ever be used. But
it may not be.
We can certainly agree to put in a stub there.
My biggest concern with this application, and it's been hit on by each of the protesters, they say density, density, density. What bothers me about this is something that Commissioner Hensley said on the last application. It's little up against big. This application meets the 75% requirement that we adopted, that the council watered down. It technically meets it by making the lots on the east side of this addition deep, okay? So I understand that there's technical compliance there. What I have a difficulty with is I don't really think that's in the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish with that. That troubles me greatly.
Well, my concern, and I think I mentioned it earlier, is the density as it relates to the infrastructure, the ability to get people in and out of this area and in and out of the adjacent existing developments. And I'm aware that it does take 20 minutes to get from 164th Street to Memorial on May Avenue in the morning. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I've certainly made the case for years that we need to have the infrastructure in place to support the development that we do in order to have a quality of life for everybody that they've come to expect or ought to believe they can expect from the city. And to knowingly create a quality of life issue, a significant negative one, and I always go back to Penn and Memorial and the mess we created there and took 15 plus years to even address, and where we don't really have a good solution for getting in and out of here, and I haven't heard a good one. I mean, two points of ingress and egress on 164th Street don't, to me, manage 400-plus residential lots here. So, at least as it stands right now, I will not support this.
Well, I guess all roads lead to density. My problem with this application, it has to do with the design of it. I mean, I'm with Commissioner Hensley. It's just too straight. It's too many houses trying to drain out on to two straight streets, basically, if you leave off the one on the east. And it's just going to funnel traffic down through there in a way that, as a mother with two small children, I just would be really, really concerned about.
Well, the design meets regulations in that sense. I mean, however you lay this out in here, if you have this number of lots, you're still going to have the same number of people trying to get in and out of 2 points of ingress and egress on 164th Street. It doesn't matter whether the streets are curvilinear or something else. I understand what you're saying about going straight up and down.
How fast the traffic moves, it makes a big difference.
Right. But we still get out here, and we're going to take people 30 minutes to get to Memorial on May instead of 20. And I think that's simply a mistake. I mean, that's how I relate the density question. We really, and I understand Nick's point, we're kind of defeating the purpose of what we intended when we wanted a little better adjustment between subdivisions. But technically it meets it. I don't like that. But the important thing to me is how do we deal with all of these people and all of these houses now? And the answer to me is we can't.
You know, I understand the economics of development. the more you can sell and less you can give away, the more money you make at the end. But in some cases, you have to bite the bullet and build a little bit bigger house, sell the lot for a little bit more or something. But I think the density on this thing is astronomical. And I think, I agree with, I know it meets our design standards. But, these straight streets, you could sell tickets on, on a quarter of a mile racetrack down through two of these streets. And I'm just not ready to vote for it today. I think there's some things that needs to be done with this, with the design, and some of the other considerations that that you're going to develop to the west. I think that needs to be incorporated in this also. And I could not vote for this today at all.
Let me make another comment on what Commissioner Gales said about technical compliance. It's not only technical compliance, but it's the minimum amount that you could possibly have done to bring this into line with the subdivision regulations without regard to neighborhoods, the density, infrastructure that Commissioner Yokel just said. That really is kind of offensive to me, that you put something like this in front of us with a racetrack from the south to the north. You made a little stub over there. This isn't going to, we would like to see subdivisions develop in a more compatible way with not just the neighborhoods. I don't care that there's an acre, half acre, doesn't matter at all. But you squeezed in a minimal amount. You did the minimal amount of common areas, which are just not enough at all. These people are going to be jammed in. There's two things on the outside and two little strips on one entrance. That's your common area. I really don't like minimum, and then, our garage front guidelines, we're not going to even look at those. We're going to plant these trees and have a row of garage fronts. That's my problem with this entire application. And so, without further ado, I'm going to move to deny.
Well, Commissioner, if the subdivision regulations are not what the Commission wants to see on plats, then possibly the subdivision regulations should be amended to what you do want to see on plats, because that's what we have to go by.
I'm agreeing with everything that the other commissioners have said. The racetrack, the entrances, the infrastructure. There's all sorts of things, and density. I'm agreeing with all the other comments that have been made about this particular application, and that's why I move to deny it.
Second. Any further discussion, Commissioners? We have a motion and a second to deny. Cast your votes. And you are denied.
Item 11 is PC 10246, an application by Timber Creek Estates to rezone a tract of land south of Southwest 15th Street and west of Mustang Road from AA Agricultural and RMH1 and Community Unit Plan CUP 75 to R1 Single Family, Ward 3.
Tim, should we provide cushions?
Yeah, I was thinking a crane maybe to get me back up. Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates on behalf of the applicant. This is more or less a housekeeping issue to get the zoning in compliance and take it out of the CUP. There are no TEs.
Okay, we did the preliminary plat last meeting on this particular case. Is that right, Tim?
Yes, sir.
I had to be reminded of that. I'm really not that smart.
And this is, you approved the preliminary plat subject to us filing this.
Right. No one signed up.
I'll move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve item 11. Cast your votes, and that's approved. And now we have the final plat for the same.
Yes, the final plat, Section 1, west portion, again following the everything that was in the preliminary plat. We agree with all the TEs. I think JJ has an amendment to TE number 2 that refers to the subregs relative to the stub extension, and we agree with his amendment.
I have that. And for the commissioners, that TE2 will read, the plat should include right-of-way for a street stub to the south. Construction of the street stub can be held in reserve as provided in Section 5.3.1D of the subdivision regulations.
Move approval.
Second. A motion is second to approve item 12 with new TE2. Cast your votes, and it's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, Planning Commission committees, planning commissioners.
We have lunch next time?
I have a reminder. We are scheduled on the 25th to have lunch with Kevin at 11:30 at the Museum Cafe. That's 2 weeks from today.
Okay.
Jim?
I want to ask Public Works a question.
Oh, Curtis. No. Yeah, Kurt.
Yeah.
Curtis.
Curtis.
You're up.
Thought you were going to get out of here, didn't you?
Thought the lights
The Heart Hospital on 240 just opened in business. And it's my understanding that we did not get a road easement in front of that building to continue that road. The road continues, but it continues through their parking lot. And it's my understanding that we did not get an easement for that road. And if they wanted to, they could block it off at both ends. Of course, that wouldn't be possible. And they completed the road to the bridge to the west, but we did not get that easement for that road.
Let me check into that. I'm not sure the details of it. I believe you brought that to our attention. I brought up the question last meeting about that. But let me check into that and make sure. I've driven in there, and I thought of it more of a parking lot entry because I had to weave through it. So I'm not familiar with the site beyond that. There's a service road out front, correct?
No.
Is there not? Because
no, that is the service road.
Let me check into that, sir. Commissioner, I'm not familiar.
Somebody's going to get killed.
But if you would give me that, I can call you with the information, and I'll check into it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Planning Department, Russell?
I don't have anything this month. Okay.
Development Services, JJ has nothing. Municipal Counselor's Office? Citizens to be heard? Motion to adjourn? Janice?